This is the Morning Tailgate.
I'll just tell the Raider Nation that we have to earn your trust. We got to earn those seats in the stands by putting a great product on the field. Words will not do it. It's our actions.
With Vince Sapienza, Vinny Bonsignor, and Clay Baker on Raider Nation Radio 920.
Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Tailgate Show, AM 920 on Raider Nation Radio, 920 AM here in Las Vegas and elsewhere. Obviously, it can be heard elsewhere. I'm Vinny Bonsignor with Clay Baker, and we've got a really interesting show, I think, today, and we're talking about the proper time to get Fernando Mendoza on the football field. And I know we've talked about that a lot, this offseason, or really ever since the Raiders drafted Fernando Mendoza. We want your thoughts, 702-365-9200, on this very subject, because there's so many different ways to look at it. Do you sit him for the entire year, a la Patrick Mahomes? Do you get him on the field day one, a la Caleb Williams and, many, many others that we've seen over the last few years? Do you let Kirk Cousins start the first 5 or 6 games and then hand it over to Fernando, whatever the record might be? Is that the right way to do it? There's just so many different layers to this, so many different angles to take, so many different ways to look at it, and we want your thoughts on 702-365-9200 on what your preferred timeline is. We're going to be talking to Jesse Merrick at 8:30 a.m. We're talking to Ryan McFadden, who covers the Raiders for ESPN, at 9 a.m., and the great Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports will be in at 9:30 a.m. And, Clay, I've done a little bit of homework, well, not a little bit, but a lot of homework looking at different ways to do this. And one situation that I think fits perfectly with what the Raiders are doing right now. It's like it's like the exact same situation, right, that the Raiders faced, that the New York Giants faced back, I think, in 2004 when they drafted Eli Manning, right? Eli Manning was technically the first pick in the draft, or he was the first pick in the draft, but remember, he didn't want to go to the San Diego Chargers, so it forced a trade to the New York Giants. The New York Giants were coming off a 4-12 season the year before. They fired their coach. They bring in Tom Coughlin. Remember, the Raiders coming off a 3-14 season. They fired their coach. They bring in a new coach, Clint Kubiak. They've got Fernando Mendoza. The Giants had, Eli Manning. The Raiders go and sign Kirk Cousins. The Giants had signed Kurt Warner, same first name, or not, almost the same first name, but almost the same exact type of credentials. Obviously, Warner had been a Super Bowl champion, but it had been a few years since that had happened. Kirk Cousins, a highly accomplished quarterback. Both were going to be brought in to their situations to be that stopgap type of a guy that was going to hold down the fort until they handed it off to the heir apparent, Eli Manning, in the Giants case, and obviously, Fernando Mendoza here with the Raiders. Well, Kurt Warner did start that season, Clay.
Yeah,
and he was 5-4, coming off a 4-12 season. So 5-4 is looking pretty good. You're in the thick of the playoff race, right? So 5-4, you're thinking, stick with it. Let's see where that can go. Tom Coughlin, thinking long range, said, "Nah, you know what? Totally understand that we're here in the playoff hunt, but we drafted Eli Manning for a reason. It's time to get him on the field and get that going." They put Eli Manning on the field. The Giants go 1-6, Clay. 1-6. They wasted the 5-4 start. They handed it off to Eli Manning. They go 1-6. A lot of people, I'm sure, were hanging their heads. There was a lot of controversy at the time of doing it. But Tom Coughlin said, "I'm thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about right now. Right now doesn't matter as much as the future." The very next year, Clay, after that 1-6 start, after Eli Manning got on the field, went through all the ups and downs. Obviously, 1-6. There's some downs there, right? The learning curve, straightened that thing out, got the experience, got on the field in real time, learned how to play football and quarterback at the NFL level in real time, not watching over on the sidelines. He got 7 games to go out there on the field and experience it and set himself up for the next year. And lo and behold, the very next year, the New York Giants go 11-5 and make the playoffs.
Yeah, and everything changed after that. They found their franchise quarterback in the draft, and they found their franchise quarterback to get really meaningful snaps in that first year. And it wasn't as if they didn't have talent at that position, because Kurt Warner was very good and became a Hall of Famer. But what they wanted to see at that point was winning football, and they were 5-4, but they had lost 3 other of the next 4 games, and games they thought they should have won. And for Coughlin, I remember him saying it was good for the franchise to take the franchise quarterback and put him on the field, and that experience in the second half of the season made all the difference.
Yeah, exactly. What they wanted to do more than anything was start developing him in real time on the field, not on the not from the sidelines. Which there's merit to doing that. There is. I mean, there is some merit to standing over there and watching the NFL football and seeing it from that perspective, and having the headphones on and listen to the play calls and the conversations between the offensive coordinator or head coach, if the head coach is an offensive coordinator. And the quarterback, all of that has merit. Breaking down film, seeing it, all of that. But what really, to me, helps the most is actually getting on the field and playing. And 5-4, they could have easily stuck with Kurt Warner and gotten it straightened out. I know they had stumbled a little bit, to get to that 5-4. But I firmly believe that Coughlin, regardless of how they got to 5-4, I firmly believe, looking back, that was the right move. That was what they were going to do. That was part of the plan. I know the Raiders have a plan for Fernando Mendoza, but I'm hoping, and I want everyone else to chime in, 702-365-9200, whether it's day one or after a certain period of time. How imperative is it? How important in terms of Fernando's development is it that the Raiders give him a chance in year one, regardless of what's going on, regardless of where the record is, if Kirk, is the guy that starts the season. Do you feel like, for the long range, for the development of Fernando Mendoza, for the purposes of, and it's not just Fernando, it's Fernando learning how to play with Brock Bowers and Jalen Naylor, right, and Trey Tucker and Ashton Jeanty and Tyler Linderbaum and the offensive line, it's them developing the necessary chemistry with Fernando as well. It's not just a singular thing of, this is all about Fernando Mendoza. This is all about the Raiders offense under Fernando Mendoza, and all of that kind of coming together and working through whatever learning curve and transition is going to inevitably occur. Again, you don't want 1-6. Obviously, that's a worst case scenario right there for the Giants. But by getting him on the field, it set him and that offense and the Giants up for the success which happened the very next year with the 11-5 finish.
And sometimes we take a look at what are the factors that might be similar to what the Giants had with Eli Manning in that year of 2004 as compared to what Mendoza will have this year with the Las Vegas Raiders. And it always felt like, to me, and still does, is like, all right, how quickly can we reflect and see how this offensive line for the Raiders will have chemistry and be strong enough to say, all right, in comparison to last year, this is a good spot for a rookie quarterback to get in there and start having the meaningful snaps. And back in 2004, Eli Manning and the Giants, that was a young offensive line, but he had 3 guys on that line that started 16 games, Deal, as well as Jason Whittle and Luke Pettigrew, and even Chris Snee, who was a rookie, played 11 games, and they had Sean O'Hara at center. The point is that it was a young offensive line, but they felt good enough that under Kurt Warner that there was chemistry, and they felt as if I would have to think, this is a good spot. This is a green light that they feel like we can now operate with an offensive line with Fernando Mendoza, so we're not throwing him out there in a situation that was like last year where he had a lot of inconsistent play up in that trench.
Yeah, and that's obviously going to play into it as well. I refuse to believe that the Raiders' offensive line is going to stay pat from last year. I do not believe I just cannot fathom bringing in Tyler Linderbaum, getting a healthy, obviously health plays into it, but assuming everyone stays healthy, as you just mentioned, those guys, a bunch of those guys in the Giants played a full season. That would be really ideal for the Raiders to have their key players playing a full season. And if they do, between what I believe is good talent and good personnel, that obviously in some cases needs to be developed, and there needs to be progress by guys like DJ Glaze, guys like Caleb Rogers if he's out on the field, Jackson Powers-Johnson without question. Spencer Burford needs to do his job, but I do not believe that it's going to stand pat. And by stand pat, I mean they're not going to be the worst offensive line in the NFL. And in fact, I think there's a better chance that they're going to go from 32 to 18, 19. Even at that, that's going to be a really strong sign of progress, and i.e. the comfort level that you're not just putting Fernando, Mendoza, or any quarterback for that matter behind the firing line of an offensive line that just can't protect them. And so yes, that's going to play into it. And look, I also don't mind the fact that there's going to be some hard learning lessons even in that regard. Like you're gonna take your sacks. Eli Manning in those games, 1-6, 7 games, 13 sacks, not bad actually, but he did get hit a little bit, and he got to experience all that, which I think all of it is very beneficial.
I think this is a very good comparison because Tom Coughlin was somebody who understood, okay, I'm not going to worry too much about the schedule, but when there's a time that I feel like this is the right moment for this franchise to move forward with the franchise quarterback, he wasn't scared of a daunting schedule that he had in the wake of a season where they obviously knew that they were going to be behind the 8 ball with some talent, but they also felt like this was a moment where regardless of the schedule, let's get our guy in there. And I wonder if that's also the same feeling for somebody like Clinton Kubiak. Once the things that he feels that are checked off as far as the need to go and bring somebody in that they feel that offensive line and the weapons and the chemistry of the offense is working, then this is going to be the time to bring him in. And I wonder if they feel the same way about entering Mendoza in a schedule, by the middle of the season when you feel like everything should be clicking, it's going to be a frying pan week after week where everybody is going to be put up to the test, but they didn't blink. The Giants didn't blink, and I wonder if the Raiders will be in that situation where they feel like this is the time and they push that button with confidence.
Yeah, and I think that I would venture to say, like, I'm sure Tom Coughlin, in his worst nightmare, didn't think that 1-6 was going to happen. You don't go in thinking, all right, we're going to put Eli Manning in, and we're going to go 1-6, and we're just going to have to deal with that. I don't think that was the mindset. However, I do think, and you have to be thinking like this if you make a decision like they made, and a decision that the Raiders might have to make eventually, whether it's day one or down the line, in year one, is we can't necessarily be focused on the results of the game, the outcomes of the game.
Yeah.
Whoever's on the schedule, whatever that looks like, whether it's a daunting, stretch or a manageable stretch, you have to set aside the outcome of the game in favor of the development of the quarterback. And again, I have to stress, it's not just the development of Fernando Mendoza that I am, overly concerned about. That plays a big role in this, but it's the development of the entire offense. You look at the Raiders offense, Brock Bowers is going to be here for a long time. Ashton Jeanty is going to be here for a long time. Fernando Mendoza is going to be here for a long time. Tyler Linderbaum is only 25, 26 years old. Caleb Rogers, Jackson Powers-Johnson. This is a young offense in a lot of ways. Jalen Naylor is kind of just getting started, right? So, Jack Besh, Dante Thornton. There's a lot of youth on this offense that needs to grow together. And I just feel like it's not just about the quarterback's development. It's the entirety of the offense and getting the entire offense, the future of this offense on the field together ASAP.
And, going back to that 2004 comparison with the New York Giants, they had an interesting weapon combination. They had a running back and tight end that were explosive and had played to high levels, and that was Jeremy Shockey at tight end and Tiki Barber, who was 29 at the time, who was just really beginning to just glow in his ability to catch the football in the backfield and of course run between the tackles. That's not too unlike what the Raiders have with Mendoza right now, with two weapons at running back and at tight end that can really start doing different things and making sure that you have weapons out there that can provide mismatches downfield.
Yeah, they also had Amani Toomer, who was a 30-year-old at the time. They had Ike Hilliard, 28-year-old at the time. Ike Hilliard had 49 catches. Toomer had 51 catches. So there's if you want to play the comparison game, there's definitely some similarities, like you said. Jeremy Shockey is Brock Bowers. I think I love Jeremy Shockey. He was a damn good player. Actually.
Yeah, coming out of Miami, especially that '99 year when they went to the World with the Super Bowl against the Ravens.
Right, exactly. So there are some similarities there. We mentioned the offensive line. Clay mentioned the offensive line. There's some similarities there. There's some similarities with the coaching situation. That was Tom Coughlin's first year with the Giants, taking over a 4-12 team. You got Clint Kubiak in his first year. Now Coughlin had been an accomplished head coach previously in Jacksonville, so I'm sure he had a little clout. There's no doubt. But I also believe that Clint Kubiak is somebody that the Raiders believe is going to be here for a long time. So I think from his a standpoint of this is going to be less about the outcomes of the game and more about the development of the entire football team, laying a foundation, creating, putting the pillars in place that's going to lead to future success. That there's understanding that, look, this is a transition year. Yeah, you want to win as many games as possible. That is always the ultimate goal. But I don't think that this is an outcome-driven season. It's more of a foundational setting, development setting, a type of a season, with the idea that Clint Kubiak and Fernando Mendoza and this young Raiders team is going to be together, for a good chunk of time. And so let's set up, success for the future, even if it means a little bit of pain involved early on, because those outcomes might not always look really good because of what you're dealing with in terms of transitioning a young quarterback into the role. Now, here's the other thing about it, Clay. There's too many examples of young quarterback. Like, it doesn't always have to be dire. We're saying, okay, 1-6. There's a possibility that it could be like that, for the Raiders with Fernando Mendoza, being a first-year quarterback. But there's just as much a likelihood that it could be, what happened with C.J. Stroud or Bo Nix, right? Now, in Bo Nix's case, they had a lockdown defense in Denver, and that kind of carried the day. If the Raiders defense can show improvement as well, that's obviously going to help things, so that you don't have to ask whoever the quarterback is to score 35 points a game. And that I don't know, this offense is capable of doing that, and hasn't been for a long time. So, it's going to be a team game to open up the possibility that this doesn't have to be dire straits. There could be, a quick turnaround, like a Jaden Daniels in Washington or a C.J. Stroud, or if you want to look at the second year of a Caleb Williams or a second year of Drake May, it could just as easily be that as it could be a struggle like we're talking about right now.
Man, we always got that inclination of that second week of the preseason when the Raiders go into Houston for that joint practice as being like a hallmark spot for, hey, this is a window that's open for Fernando to maybe make the impression that we possibly start the season. And especially when you think of how we looked at yesterday for power rankings from BR, Bleacher Report, where the Miami Dolphins, Raiders' first opponent, was the last team in the league, according to them. So, you think about certain areas like, where's a good spot? Obviously, you can never go and find the perfect spot. And for Coughlin with Eli Manning, making that first game against the Atlanta Falcons with Michael Vick, that was a very good team who went on to win 11 games that year. Coughlin didn't blink. He wasn't afraid of, like, who are we starting and where it is. is, it's not that important. And I wonder if that will happen for the Raiders. If it doesn't happen for Fernando Mendoza early in the year to get that meaningful playing time and maybe even start to begin the season, where will it start for him in the middle of that schedule? But for me, that would be a dynamite motion, a situation like C.J. Stroud or Bo Nix, where you feel like your heir apparent is ready right now.
Yeah, and Doug Peterson, former NFL coach, shared his thoughts on when that should be. And in his case, it's not even halfway through the season or down the road. Doug Peterson thinks that Fernando Mendoza should be starting way earlier than that. Here's Doug Peterson.
Let's get this guy out there week one. Let's start having our growing pains week one. Let's not prolong it into October or November or later in the season when maybe the season's over. I think it's very beneficial. I remember having a conversation with Coach McDermott when he drafted Josh Allen, and he called me and he says, Doug, what do you think? Well, how did you handle Carson Wentz? And I said, if you think that Josh Allen is your guy, you need to get him out there week one. And he did that. There were a lot of growing pains in that first year, and they weathered that storm, and now look where Buffalo is. Kirk Cousins is a solid number 2 that you can rely on, and I think he's a great mentor for Fernando. So I think this is a win-win, I think, at quarterback, for the Raiders.
So that's Doug Peterson. He had experience with Carson Wentz, as he mentioned, and you think about that. Carson Wentz was on his way to potentially winning the MVP trophy that year, and ends up getting suffering a knee injury toward the end of the season against the L.A. Rams. I was at that game. They ended up winning the Super Bowl that year, kind of miraculously so. But in his mindset and Doug Peterson's mindset, why wait? Why wait? Just get Fernando on the field. Live and survive whatever the circumstances might be. But it's more important in his mind anyway to go ahead and get the quarterback out on the field as early as possible. But we want your thoughts, 702-365-9200. But before we get to that, hey guys, since 1942, Sal's Mexican restaurants have been serving the best Mexican food in California's Central Valley. From their award-winning salsas to all their great classics like chili carne and chili verde, they've been go-to restaurants for multiple generations. And here's the thing, you don't even have to be in California or the Central Valley to enjoy this great food. All you have to do is go to salsmexicanrestaurant.com. That's salsmexicanrestaurant.com to get hooked up. You go online, you put your order in, whatever it is that you order, and wherever it is that you are, it'll get delivered to you, and your next party, your next family get-together, or your next tailgate is completely set up. However, if you're in the Central Valley, maybe you live there or you're just passing through, please make sure to stop by their locations in Selma, Fresno, or Madera. And when you do, ask for Sal, Carl, or any of their managers and tell them that the Morning Tailgate and Raider Nation Radio sent you. Or again, just check them out online at salsmexicanrestaurant.com. It's the Morning Tailgate Show on Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m.
Vince, Vinny, and Clay want to hear from you. Call or text the show at 702-365-9200. Now, back to the Morning Tailgate.
Do you think that they pivot to Mendoza early, later? Do you think it just kind of will reveal itself when it reveals itself?
I think because the buy is such a late buy, then I think I am less certain. Like if they had a buy in week 5,
right,
I would feel comfortable pinpointing that and just saying just go there. But since it's not until later in the season, I think that just makes it more confusing to me. Right. I think in a perfect world, they should be trying to get Fernando Mendoza as many reps as they can this year if they feel comfortable doing so. If the offensive line is playing well and they get into a rhythm of chemistry, chemistry is going to be important this year in that particular scheme. It always is anyway, but that's what you want to see there. I think some of the questions are similar to when the Patriots had Drake May and said, okay, we got to keep him on the bench until we see a few things because our O-line had been a disaster the year before. We got to make sure that he's protected and he's put in a good position to succeed. I need to see that from the O-line. I want to know that the wide receivers are there to be obviously Brock is a safety blanket, but I need some confidence that the wide receivers are going to catch these balls, right? I want to see how it's going to all work with the wide receivers and that everybody's going to be in the right places before I put him into that situation. But once all of those boxes are checked, I need to see him in there as soon as possible because this is a year where you're sort of saying, we're not the goal. I don't think anybody in their head is like, yeah, this is a Super Bowl year, we're going to go make a run, or even a playoffs. You're just trying to get better. And by the end of the season, you want that arrow to be pointing up, and you want to be feeling optimism that we are on the right track. We have our right guy. And next year, we're going to put another piece in there. We're going to go for it. And so I think you need him to get reps in order to really feel confident at the end of the year that you've accomplished that.
That's Lindsay Rhodes from Sumer Sports on with Q Myers on Unnecessary Roughness yesterday, and that's music to my ears. She's speaking to the choir, my choir right there. I've known Lindsay for years, going all the way back to when we covered Pepperdine basketball together, way back in the day, and she is spot on, by the way. It's the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio. Clay and Vinny here with you, and Connor doing his thing, running the show. Clay, what do you think about that? I'm completely fine. Give it a few games just to check off a few boxes, make sure that offensive line is good to go. But with the ultimate goal of, hey, wherever you are, whatever's going on, at some point, and sooner rather than later, given how the bye week is way down the road, you got to hand it off to Fernando Mendoza and forget necessarily about the outcomes. It's a 50-50 proposition. Either it's going to go good or it's not, maybe not go so good. But don't be focused on the outcomes of games. Be more focused on the merits of getting Fernando Mendoza practical experience, on the job experience, actually playing the games, not watching from the sidelines as soon as possible. And
I feel like Kubiak has that latitude, right? Like he doesn't have to go and, this is your first year as head coach. We got to make the playoffs. Those expectations are not there whatsoever. But the most important asset on your team is that number one pick that you just got. So you have to go and accentuate that. Having him sit for too long, that doesn't show any sort of progress that you thought you would have in this first year. And it's funny how I love how you brought up Doug Peterson just before that. Just be saying that they traded Bradford before the year started, and Wentz became the de facto quarterback to start the year. They went 7-9. They missed the playoffs, right? But the next year they went 13-3 with Carson Wentz. So as Peterson is a guy that's always in attack mode, you look at a lot of examples that that regardless of schedule, there has to be a time when you feel confident that he can go and start playing games, regardless of how daunting things look as far as the opponents are concerned that are in your wake. You can't worry about that.
Yeah, and why did they trade Sam Bradford? Kind of brought up it was sort of a scenario that we brought up yesterday in terms of Kirk Cousins potentially having a little bit of a market. If you remember, the Minnesota Vikings, Teddy Bridgewater ruined his knee probably for the rest of his life, basically, unfortunately, on a non-contact drill during a training camp practice, and went down. And the Vikings had playoff aspirations, so they were like, we can't. We got to go do something at quarterback. They were the team that traded for Sam Bradford, took him off the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles, and because of that, the Eagles said, we're going, to Carson Wentz. We're okay with whatever might happen, and they actually ended up playing really well with Carson Wentz as the quarterback. But all sorts of things. That's the whole point, Clay. You have to be open-minded to anything right now, but first and foremost, to me, is the development of Fernando Mendoza and getting him acclimated to this young offense that's going to, I believe, be around for a while. That needs to be the goal. And I firmly believe that Clint Kubiak has that kind of latitude. I would almost guarantee that there's not going to be a coaching change at the end of the season, no matter what happens. This is the plan. They're sticking to it. And this year, while everybody always wants to win, I mean, we can't lose sight of that. I'm not saying that you're going out there tanking. You're going to go play hard to win as many games as possible, and that's always the ultimate goal. But this is a long-range view, not a short-term view. So outcomes takes a back seat to development, and you can still show progress even if the outcomes aren't always great.
And, there was also just a bit of a comparison as far as the way the certain kind of philosophy rolls with that's the Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson matchup back in 2016 is that Peterson did have a very strong concentration on the run game that year in 2017, that he wanted to make sure that it wasn't all on the quarterback's shoulders. And there was a 50-50 split with run pass, but they had a three-headed monster where they were able to rush for over 2,100 yards that year in 2017. So it gives you an idea that you don't put it all on the quarterback's shoulders in order to move the ball down the field. And you also see how Kubiak wants to and has done a 50-50 run-pass ratio over the years. And you can kind of see how the roster is constructed right now, that they do have a run-heavy option if they could choose to go and do that, which I think they will here in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's always going to be the goal. Good teams understand that you have to be able to run the ball, and again, just as when we talk about some of the kind of eerie similarities between what the Giants were dealing with, and I think it was 2004, if I'm correct, whatever year that Eli Manning showed up on the scene, and all of the subplots that are very much like what the Raiders are facing this year. I've always brought up that 2016 really bad Rams team, and they cleaned house basically from their coaching staff. They firmly went behind with Jared Goff as their quarterback. They hired Sean McVay, and look at who they had at running back, Todd Gurley. I know that Ashton Jeanty doesn't fit the profile of Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was 6'1", 6'2". They're two different types of players, physically. But the talent, I think, from Ashton Jeanty is very much like Todd Gurley, and the production level is very much in line with what Todd was doing. So you look at that 2016 Rams offense, which was terrible, kind of like the Raiders offense was last year, but it completely turned around from one year to the next, going to McVay, i.e. Clint Kubiak, bringing in Aaron Kromer as the offensive line coach. There's your Rick Dennison, bringing in Tyler Linderbaum. There's your the Whitworth, who they signed, a veteran, a left tackle that the Rams signed, and all of a sudden Todd Gurley went from 800, 900 yards and a 3-point whatever yards per carry average to 1,300 yards with the same exact amount of. He had one more carry the next year compared to the 2016. Everything turned around. So yes, that running game is going to be a key part of this Raiders offense. So look, you don't win, Clay. I don't care who your quarterback is. Name me the time where a team won at a high level with a zero run game. Maybe the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, but even that, you still had to be able to run the ball. The Chiefs did, and they also had a great defense. So it's never really on right. one guy or one quarterback. That's a recipe for not disaster necessarily, but you're not going to win at the highest level if it's a one-man show. We're going to go out to the Raider Nation Radio listener line because Raider Dave is on the line. How you doing, Raider Dave?
You guys are so nailing it this morning. It sounds fantastic. One of the things that I think that I would love to see with the Raiders opening up against, and I'll start there because you guys already talked about how important it is to go well for Mendoza that week in the scrimmage, week 2. But for the opener, if the Raiders can get up 27-10 on Miami by the end of the third quarter, I don't see why you don't bring him in for the fourth quarter. I can't understand any kind of argument there about why you wouldn't want to do that. Because isn't Kubiak at such an advantage right now where nobody has seen him with this offense? I mean, yeah, he's got his tendencies in Seattle and how he's done this in New Orleans and things that he likes to do, but nobody's seen him with this personnel. So the whole season is going to be pretty much an open book of creativity to where he can do and show whatever he wants to show early or not. I mean, it's not everybody's going to have the whole playbook mastered by, week 5 or 8 or whatever anyway. He's going to continue to add to it. But I think if the Raiders can be up against one of the worst teams in the league, then why not bring Mendoza in on that fourth period to get him some little bit of game speed experience, because it is going to be ramped up a little bit over the preseason. And I don't know that he'll get a lot in that week 3 preseason matchup against Arizona. I think O'Connell's going to play that whole game. They wouldn't want to risk either one of their first and second string quarterbacks. But what do you think about them being up on some of these first 3 games and having Mendoza take some snaps? Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's some merit to it. I don't want him coming in and just handing the ball off. If you're up 27-10, obviously you're going to be trying to milk the clock at that point and play strategically to hold on to win. So if you're gonna bring him in, I would hope anyway that the full playbook is going to be there, to be utilized, Clay, so that in a way that it's a benefit to Fernando to actually get out there and do some things and not just hand the ball off.
No, I want game plan. Yeah, I want him to be a part of the strategy of the game. I want him to be a part of watching the game film and getting prepared for going downfield and doing the things that Kubiak is expecting of him. Because just handing the ball off is not enough, is it? There's some good merit to it, but I want a little more.
Yeah, exactly. Just put him out there and say, look, we're up 26. I mean, the thing is, you do have to be careful. You don't want him throwing a pick six and all of a sudden, I don't know. There's different ways to look at that, because you don't want, him coming. It's not the easiest thing to come in, off the sidelines and go out there and play, especially in that kind of a situation, because you want to be careful. You don't want to be overly aggressive because you got a lead to protect. Mm-hmm. So there are some complications to that. But I would think that they got to figure out a way to get him on the field, and maybe in those types of situations, or just start him against the Miami Dolphins. Pretty good about where you are. Clay, you got something to give away.
Yeah, at 7:40 each day, we'll give you a chance to get the word of the day out on the text line for your chance to win these great vacations we got to. Brought to you by Raider Nation Radio 920 and Terribles. Bringing back the summer of fun. We got adventures to Hawaii, the Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, and this week it's the Mississippi River Cruise. Up and down the Big Muddy on the Great Cruise Cabin, 5 nights. We take care of your flights. We take care of your port fees, all the taxes and gratuities. So here you do. This is what you got to do. You got to go and text the word RIVER, RIVER, to 702-365-9200. That's our word of the day. From now until 5 p.m. Pacific time, text the word RIVER to 702-365-9200. It's the Summer of Fun, brought to you by Terribles and Raider Nation Radio 920. Coming up next, more of your thoughts on the phones and on the text here on Raider Nation Radio 920.
We'll take your comments and questions on X. Follow us at RNR920AM. Let's dig into the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920.
But once you're selected, it doesn't matter. Now you're just a member of the team. Yeah. Now you have to develop him. And I think most people, and there are probably a lot of fans, they think just because you get a player on the team, well, now he's going to be great. No, there's a lot of development that still needs to happen. Like I said, my first year, I got drafted 199. By my second year, it didn't matter where I was drafted. Yeah. Now, I was going to go kick ass. Mm-hmm. So, to me, I don't give a if you're the first round.
Welcome back to the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 AM. That was Tom Brady talking about the development of a quarterback. Tom has been on record as saying, I don't think he came out and said that you got to sit year one. You got to sit your quarterback year one, just like I sat year one. I don't think he's been that emphatic about it, but he has been emphatic about taking your time, pouring the development into him. Don't being in a rush to rush the quarterback out there, and that's all fine. And the thing is, in Tom Brady's situation, they didn't draft him to be the quarterback in year one. They didn't even know that they hadn't necessarily quarterback that could be a quarterback in year 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. He was a late round draft pick. They had Drew Bledsoe on the team. They were coming off a really good season the year before. Drew Bledsoe was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, to be perfectly honest. So it was a wild card, Tom Brady. So there was not even an ounce 1 second of thought given to, okay, we got to develop Tom Brady because we got to get him onto the field as quickly as possible. That's the difference between his situation in New England and what the Raiders are dealing with Fernando Mendoza. Fernando Mendoza was clearly drafted to be the quarterback of the future as soon as possible, and this isn't a day 3 or whatever pick Tom was, whatever day that was back in those days. Of hey, we'll see what we got with this guy Tom Brady from Michigan. This is, hey, we got to develop Fernando Mendoza. We got to do it the right way because he's going to be the quarterback here for a good long time. And so I think it's just two different situations when you think about Tom Brady sitting year one. That was inevitable, short of a bunch of people getting hurt. Maybe even 2 quarterbacks getting hurt that year. I'd have to look at who was the backup to Bledsoe going into that season or into that offseason. But this is not the same as it was. It was inevitable that Tom Brady was going to sit. He wasn't drafted to be anything more than let's see what you get with this late draft pick.
We see on the text line at 702-365-9200 a vast split on different opinions about this. The first one that came in, it just kind of has me at a little bit of a laugh, just in a way that says East Oakland Raider says, "Whoa, no." Talking about Mendoza starting early. We want wins. It's easy for you guys to say that. You guys get paid to watch and report, but we have to blow a big bag to see our Raiders not win and develop and all that good stuff. East Oakland Raider. This is not about, whether we're in the press box or not. Looking at this objectively, what makes you feel like, all right, that there's a guarantee that Kirk Cousins is going to win a bunch of games? There's no guarantee in that. So at some point you have to go and say, looking at this team in a realistic view, that there are good things that can be done here. If there's losses, there's losses. But you could see that there's a good need for that if Mendoza is starting and getting meaningful snaps, because that's how a lot of quarterbacks get ahead the next year. And even this year, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned that you cannot learn on the sidelines. There has to be a time in which you feel like, all right, maybe this is a moment in time where, we do have an experienced quarterback like Kirk Cousins, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a playoff season in the wings.
No, and again, if you were a fan of the New York Giants and you're 5-4, coming off a 4-12 season the year before, you kind of like where you're at 5-4. If you finish strong, maybe you go, even if you go 4-3 down the over the next 7 games, you got a chance to be a 9-win team, and that back then put you in a good position to go make the playoffs. Heck, I think the Giants might have won a couple of Super Bowls, winning 9 games in the regular season. So, but no, they decide we're going to go with Eli Manning. They go 1-6. That was the trade-off right there, and yet that it's and short term, that was painful, but long term, it was the right thing to do. The very next year, they're 11-5. But just as Clay is saying, there's no guarantee. You're not automatically saying to yourself, all right, if we go with Fernando losing, if we go with Kirk Cousins wins, that's not the decision here, because there's no way of even predicting that's or guaranteeing that it's one or the other. If you go with Fernando Mendoza, it means you're going to lose. If you go with Kirk Cousins, it means you're going to win. I don't see it that way. And by the way, there's so many examples recently of going with the rookie, developing the rookie, and also winning, and also getting things turned around quicker than you thought. So, if you do start Fernando Mendoza to start the season, you're not necessarily saying, all right, there goes any chance to win, because right. Because between the improvements that the Raiders have made from a coaching perspective and from a personnel perspective, and Fernando Mendoza just being a really good prospect, there's just as much a likelihood that this will work out in every single way. The development of Fernando Mendoza, the development of the Raiders offense, the development of the Raiders period, and also you might win a bunch of games as well, because we've seen that happen.
Oh, you definitely can. And, we see even like where people are wondering, like, all right, is the season lost? There's nothing lost about even if you don't make the playoffs and you still win some games, like there's nothing that is like going in the wrong direction by having Fernando start and play. And if there's some losses there, so be it. But the wins can be there down the road too. You have to have some faith in the ability of this coaching staff and the weapons around him that wins can come this year for Fernando.
Yeah, it's we want your thoughts, 702-365-9200. It's the Morning Tailgate Show, Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m., Vinny and Clay. Keep them coming. Do you want Fernando Mendoza? Are you willing to make whatever trade-off you might be making? You may be opening yourself up to a great season. You might be opening yourself up to another struggle. But there's merit to both sides of that equation, just getting Fernando Mendoza out on the field. Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m.
This is the Morning Tailgate.
Deuce! Goodbye! Into the end zone! 60 yards! Touchdown Raiders!
With Vince Sapienza, Vinny Bonsignore, and Clay Baker.
It's the trifecta for Bowers! His third touchdown of the game! And the Raiders with a chance to win it!
On Raider Nation Radio, 920.
Welcome back to the Morning Tailgate on Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. Vinny, Clay, and Connor in charge today. And we're asking the question, 702-365-9200. What's the ideal scenario for you to get Fernando Mendoza on the field as a rookie? Is it imperative to you, as it is to me, that Fernando gets on the field this year? Somehow, some way, and I'm saying 8 games minimum. 8 games minimum, I think Fernando Mendoza needs to play this year. I don't care what the record is. When you have to make that decision, I would be completely fine with him starting day one. I'm completely fine with a little bit of a bridge leading up to it, maybe 5 games or so with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback, and then you hand it off to Fernando Mendoza. I just think in the bigger picture of things, it's more important to focus on getting Fernando developed, getting this offense in sync with one another, an understanding of the system, an understanding of the scheme, an understanding of the idiosyncrasies of actually playing football at the NFL level, the speed of the game, reading defenses at the line of scrimmage, operating a huddle, working, behind center, under center, making that transition. Why put that off? Let's get that started ASAP, even if it's day one or 5 weeks into the season. Get the young quarterback out on the field. How important is that to you? 702-365-9200. Or is it important to you? Clay, we've had some people text in that this should be all about wins, and forget starting the rookie quarterback. We've been suffering long enough. Let's go try to win games, and we'll worry about Fernando Mendoza at another time. I understand the passion to want to win, because of the frustration, because of the way things are going, putting wins over everything else. I don't know. I think if you want to build long-standing success and try to build that as quickly as possible, I really think your future quarterback needs to be in that equation, at an early point in his rookie season to help set that up for the future. Again, Eli Manning was 1-6. After the Giants had started the season 5-4, 1-6 his rookie year after taking over for Kurt Warner, and that looked bad, right? But the very next year they were 11-5, and I cannot sit here and think for 1 second that the experience that he got as a rookie going through that 1-6 stretch didn't benefit him and help him and help put him in a position to then go quarterback an 11-5 team the very next year.
There's a lot of examples that we're seeing that has happened, and it's not just based on just a single situation or anything. There was nothing fluky about, Carson Wentz going from 7-9 to 3-13. There's nothing fluky about what Eli Manning was doing. And quite honestly, Fernando Mendoza has a situation around him where, he can take some lumps, but there's going to be meaningful work that's getting done that can add to something. So it's not like we're all here, not sympathetic or empathetic to wanting to see wins happen, but there's no guarantee that that's a lock with just Kirk Cousins alone. And we see this on the text line, and we love the texts that are coming in at 702-365-9200. DJ Mike Scott in the 484. He says, to me, it's really as simple as this. As this is a hypothetical, DJ Mike Scott's got. If after the first 6 games you're at 500 or better, Cousins continues to start. But if we drop below 500 at any time after that, we bring in Mendoza. Other than an injury or blowout either side, Cousins should start if he wins the job in camp and have a chance to win for us. We have our future QB, and he'll be on the field eventually. What if we have a small chance of shocking the world and going to the playoffs? A long shot? Question mark, yes. But it's possible. If Mendoza wins the job in camp, I'm also all for him starting Cousins because I'm all for him starting knowing Cousins is behind him. So still, it's almost like people want it both ways. But even how the Giants were 5-4, they still felt there was a time in the schedule that, all right, they may have been winning, but they were losing games that they shouldn't have lost. And it seemed like even going up against a daunting task like the Atlanta Falcons at the time with Mike Vick, it didn't stop them from doing what they felt was necessary for the franchise. Let's not forget the most important asset on this team is that number 1 pick. That's Mendoza. You don't want to have him sit in the garage for too long.
Well, you can't. I mean, first of all, the other part of it is trying to create this perfect scenario against the perfect team and all that. I mean, it's the NFL. Everybody's good. That's just the reality of the situation. You can't be afraid, as the Giants weren't, like as you said, Michael Vick and the Atlanta Falcons were a good football team at that point. That was the week that they decided to make the handoff. They're 5-4, and I know they had stumbled a little bit to get to 5-4. But the fact of the matter was they were at 5-4. And again, if you win 4 more games over the next 7 games, you're probably in a pretty good position to maybe make the playoffs. And Tom Coughlin said it's not about that necessarily. It's about getting Eli Manning on the field. We invested the first pick in the draft in him. He's the future of this franchise. We need to get him out on the field, and it's not just to see what we have in Eli Manning. Obviously, you're going to get a pretty good idea of that. But I mean, look, if we didn't see anything, if we just erase our memory bank of what we remember seeing in that 1-6, and to be honest with you, I can't recall any of those games, so I don't even have any recollection of it. It's been a long time.
Same here.
But if you just look at the record, you're going to go, wow, that was really bad, right? And if you don't look at what happened next year, going 11-5, you would think, okay, that was a mistake. That didn't go well. But then when you look at it in its totality, just off of the what actually did happen, you're like, oh, that made a lot of sense. They took some lumps early on with Eli, but it helped set them up for immediate success the very next year. And I don't know that that's guaranteed, that 11-5 season. If you had just handed it off to Eli Manning going into year 2 rather than getting him on the field and accepting that there was going to be some negative outcomes or the possibility of some negative outcomes, I don't know that it's a guarantee that they go 11-5 without Eli playing that rookie year the season before.
Yeah, I like that. And from the 209 Raider B text in at 702-365-9200, he starts off listing the quarterbacks that didn't start season openers their rookie year. Brady, Mahomes, Montana, Favre, Rodgers, Marino, Steve Young, etc. It would be great to get Mendoza out on the field a lot and get that experience, but I love the comparison of the 2004 Giants. There also needs to be a plan in place if Kirk Cousins does really well and the Raiders are winning. The Vikings messed that up with Sam Darnold and a national championship winning quarterback in McCarthy. So what happens if Kirk Cousins does great and the Raiders are winning?
Name all those quarterbacks again.
Mahomes, Brady, Montana, Favre, Rodgers, Marino.
Okay, so Mahomes goes to a Kansas City Chiefs team that was pretty darn good with playoff aspirations.
Very much so, very solid, very above average.
Name the second quarterback that they mentioned.
Montana.
Joe Montana, I mean, he was a third-round pick. He wasn't drafted at that time with this. It was a guarantee that he was even going to be the quarterback of the future. He was a third-round pick, and I think they had Steve DeBerg at the time, and they were kind of a rebuilding team. But he eventually, got on the field, and obviously good things happened. Who was the third quarterback?
He had Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, Tom Brady was a whatever pick on a team that was really good, and they had a great quarterback in Drew Bledsoe. So he wasn't brought in. There was no inclination that he was going to be the quarterback of the future, the present, or anything like that. He was kind of a wild card pick. See what you have in this late round quarterback from Michigan. And then the other one was one more time.
Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, I think they said Marino as well, but Rodgers.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Dan Marino's in there. There's a long litany of lists.
Yeah, Dan Marino was a late first round pick and went to a team that was pretty good. I think. Am I remembering correctly that the Dolphins were they coming off the Super Bowl?
The thing is, I remember there were so many issues because of Marino in the draft.
But forget about Marino. Yeah. Just to remember where he was drafted. It was in the back of the first round.
Yeah, he slipped.
The Dolphins. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he slipped, and the Dolphins where they were drafting indicates that they were coming off a good season, right? If you're drafting last or second to last in the first round, that means that you're one of the better teams. So Dan Marino goes to a situation where there's a quarterback in place. There was a quarterback in place, and I don't think in any world did the Miami Dolphins think Dan Marino was going to be available to them, and they're like, he's just too good to pass up. So, but they also did have a pretty good quarterback, and they had a pretty good situation, so they weren't going to. There was no need to rush him out there. They had playoff aspirations. Aaron Rodgers obviously was going to a good Green Bay Packers team with Brett Favre in place. So yeah, all of those teams that you just mentioned and those situations that you just mentioned outside of maybe Joe Montana going to the 49ers at that time, I don't think they were very good. Every other team that you were talking about was a good football team with playoff aspirations and veteran quarterbacks in place. The difference with the Raiders is there are no playoff expectations for this year. You're not just saying, okay, you know what, we're gonna take our playoff caliber, our playoff quarterback who just took us to the playoffs last year in Kirk Cousins, and sit him in favor of Fernando Mendoza. That wouldn't make sense to do that if you're coming off a playoff season and you're going into the very next season with just as lofty goals as the Chiefs had, as the Miami Dolphins had, as the Green Bay Packers had, as the New England Patriots had. You're not going to make that switch off. But the Raiders are in a totally different situation. They aren't any of those teams. They're more like the Washington Commanders. They're more like the Cleveland or the Chicago Bears. Mm-hmm. They're more like the New England Patriots the year that they drafted Drake May. They're more like the Houston Texans the year that they drafted C.J. Stroud. There are no real expectations. The New York Giants when they drafted Eli Manning. The Indianapolis Colts when they drafted Peyton Manning. Do you hear what the quarterbacks that I'm mentioning right now, the situations that they went to, and the success of all of those teams? The Bears in year 2 with Caleb Williams won their division and went to the playoffs. The Patriots in year 2 with Drake May, after he played a whole bunch of games his rookie year and struggled, by the way, as did Williams with the Chicago Bears, win their division, win the AFC Championship, and go to the Super Bowl in year 2 with Drake May. And I don't know that any of that is guaranteed in either of those situations if those quarterbacks didn't play as rookies, Clay.
That's definitely it. I mean, there has to be a time when you have to have faith and when it's time to push the button on the rookie and the quarterback. And on the text line, there's been a myriad of texts, including Bill from the 925, that say very much of the same thing. And Bill's like, playoffs? He goes, slow the roll. Let's see how this offensive line and the running game is. We have waited this long. Be patient with him. Okay, so we talked about, all right, forget about when is a good time in the schedule, because it really isn't a great time. But all right, how contingent is it for you, Vinny, on the offensive line and the running game finding a certain cohesion that you feel like, all right, now is the time?
No, I believe that the running game and the offensive line are going to there's going to be a vast improvement there. So I think that even supports bringing in a Fernando Mendoza sooner rather than later, because I do believe you're going to have that as the backbone of the offense and as the foundation of the offense, so that you're not putting Fernando Mendoza into a situation where, hey, you got to go carry us. I think there will be a complementary aspect with the run game and that offensive line to protect him as well, so that you can sort of ease him into this, not expecting him to be Dan Marino to start off. Just be Fernando Mendoza wherever you are in the whole learning curve. We feel pretty good about what we have around you to help appease you and support you wherever you are on that learning curve.
702-365-9200 on the text line. Sean from the 916 says, I want to see Mendoza start this season. Best case, we win games and he grows, which is perfect going into an offseason. Maybe you can get a good wide receiver, a free agent, and even in a trade. But if we lose, we get a top 5 to 7 pick in a draft loaded with talent, and teams will go quarterback. For sure, we'll be looking at a core of Mendoza, Brock, Jeanty, and perhaps someone like Jeremiah Smith, a dominant player for years to come with rookie contracts, and you'll be playing Brock earlier. Okay, to me, it's a win-win. Thanks again, Sean from the 916. Well, that's certainly a very optimistic view, but it's not out of the realm of possibility.
Well, what he's saying is, hey, and not going to be too worried about losing a bunch of games, because you might get a great wide receiver out of it.
Think about what could be gained.
Yeah, that guy's going top 5, top 3, top 5. He's I forget who I was just looking at. One of the draft people said that this is maybe the best wide receiver that he's evaluated in the last 5-6 years, and that's saying something, because there's been some outstanding wide receivers that come down the pike recently, Clay. And
you were right that Dan Marino did when he was drafted by the Dolphins did make the Super Bowl the year previous in the shortened season of '82, thanks to Raiders 66.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, exactly. So I don't think that they went into that draft thinking, oh yeah, we're definitely going for going to draft a quarterback. There was no. I mean, I don't think anyone thought, and I do remember that draft. I don't think anyone in any imagination felt like Dan Marino was going to be available to the Dolphins. In fact, I remember going, really? They just got Dan Marino? I was a Vikings fan at the time, and I want to say that the Vikings drafted Joey Browner, the great safety from USC, which was a good pick, but in retrospect, I totally would have wished that they drafted Dan Marino. Are you kidding me? But
were the Vikings were they thinking Wade Wilson was the answer back then? Or was that a little later?
They had what year was that? That was 1984. They had Wade Wilson. I think Tommy Kramer might have still been there. So. Yeah, not the best decision ever by the Vikings or a whole bunch of other teams for that matter. And Q just texted me and he said, in that Giants situation, the Giants were on a 3-game losing streak, right? As we mentioned before handing it off to Manning, to Eli Manning, and I totally understand that. I mean, there were some dynamics and some nuances to when you just look at 5 and 4. You're like, wow, they're 5 and 4. That seems like an odd time to hand it over to your rookie quarterback. However, they were coming off a 3-game losing streak. But if you're thinking optimistically, like Tom Coughlin and the Giants, you're like, okay, yeah, we've hit a little bit of a roadblock, but we believe that we can win, 4 out of the next 7 games, maybe even 5 out of the next 7 games, get to 10 wins and get us into the playoffs. Let's just stick with Kurt Warner, but between that 3-game losing streak, and who knows, maybe that was the plan all along, regardless of where we are after 9 games or so, we're going to hand it off to the rookie. And I do remember this, Clay, at the time there were a lot of people that were questioning that, because again, you're 5 and 4 coming off a 4-win season the year before. Your head is above water at 5 and 4. You're not exactly where you want to be, especially after losing 3 games, but there's life right there. The playoffs are very much a possibility. You just got to get a few things straightened out and get back on the winning track. They said, you know what, we're gonna set that aside and maybe even sacrifice the playoffs this year. We feel really emphatic that we got to get Eli on the field. And however it came about and however that decision was made, I firmly believe that it helped set them up and Eli up for success the next year. I don't know that they go 11-5, Clay, in year 2 with Eli Manning if Eli didn't get on the field for those 7 games that he got on the field as a rookie.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think it would have been available either. you could see where things really started to mature and work out. And at the same time, the organization understands more clearly of what that particular rookie quarterback needs to have in his second year. And now the direction is making sense. It's going in the right, going in the right mix. You understand more of what this team should look like going forward. And that's an important part of what a GM and a first-year head coach needs. So I would like to see that. And even for all the examples that you feel like you have weapons right now, you still want to know, like, all right, who else is part of this mix going forward? 702-365-9200. We'll take more of your thoughts. And even Greg from the 215, Greg in New Jersey, talked about he liked that Peterson audio that we're playing in the first hour about, starting Mendoza early. And they brought up the example of, it was Peterson that was starting when they drafted Donovan McNabb. And he was sidelined after an injury. Eventually, McNabb got in there in week 11. And I would have to think Doug Peterson knew the writing on the wall. And then the rookie McNabb was waiting in the wings.
Yeah, and the Carson Wentz situation. He went 7-9 as a rookie. They ran him out there. They went 7-9 the very next year. I think they're 11-2 when he gets hurt. So again, there's a yin and a yang to it. You might be sacrificing some outcomes or putting yourself in a perilous position in terms of the overall wins. But there's so much value in actually getting on the field, getting your rookie quarterback on the field, and getting acclimated. There's a lot of different reasons, as you said, Clay, figuring out, well, what else do we need around the young quarterback, but also just the practical nature of getting on the field, making the transition from college, where the speed of the game, the defenses are on one level, and it's an entirely different level to the NFL. Why would you put that off? Because if you don't play Fernando Mendoza at all as a rookie year, regardless of what the Raiders record turns out to be in 2026, if you don't get him on the field, all you're doing is delaying that transition for another year, and that's why I say not playing him as a rookie. Forget about the outcomes. Forget about it. The record, whatever. I truly believe it would be a waste of a season for Fernando Mendoza, and maybe even for your offense and the acclimation of putting things together, if you put that off for another year, because you're liable to him go through that same exact learning curve that he would have gone through in year one in year two. Why put that off? Just try to expedite that as quickly as possible by playing him as a rookie extensively, and therefore bridging that gap and letting him see what the NFL is really like, letting him experience the speed of the game, experience playing under center, experience figuring out, is this cover 2, is it cover 3, what are we doing here, audibling, checking off to a run play, checking off to a pass play, hearing the coach. Everything's different in college too. You're not looking over to the sidelines to get your play. The plays are being given to you, transmitted to you in your helmet. There's so many different little intricacies and differences between playing, college football and college quarterback to the NFL. Just see a whole lot of value in trying to get him to experience that as early as possible, to help set him up and you up for year two, where I really believe that's the season that the Raiders are eyeing for a big turnaround.
Let's take a call before we hit Jesse Merrick at the bottom of the hour out to Kansas City with Coulter. Good morning to you, sir.
Hey, good morning, guys. I hope everybody's doing well. If I can, I just want to give a shout-out to KC Raider Nation, the fan club here, in case somebody's listening. Hey,
love it.
I think Vinny and I could probably be best friends. I think if we had some time to sit down and chat. But I agree with you. I know a lot of Raider Nation. I know the people in Vegas and everything. I get it. You want to win. I want to win. But it's been 20 years that we've sat here and just watched bad teams. Somewhat, 2016, not bad. But I'm at the point where, winning would be great. But if you're going to take him first overall, he's a Heisman Trophy winner, national champion, just get him out there. I will, listen, I'm going to buy the jerseys and I'm going to watch the games. I'm a fan. I've been a fan for 40-plus years. Even if they lose multiple games, as long as he's advancing, that's fine, because he's supposed to be the future, right? That's what we took him for, is because we feel like he can be the future of the franchise. And I love Kirk Cousins, but I just want to see what he has, as long as he's not going to get hurt.
Right,
I think we've had this conversation before about, would you take guaranteed 9 wins or whatever? Just like Vinny and Clay, you've said it, it's all hypothetical stuff. As long as he's not going to get hurt, let him go out there and just learn. And you guys hit it on the head while I was waiting to chime in. All those quarterbacks that were named off, different situations, some good, some drafted at the very back that you would have never guessed that Tom Brady would be the GOAT in those last rounds.
All
right. I mean, yeah.
Coulter, we appreciate the call, man. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I agree. And look, there's, based on Fernando Mendoza's floor, just his floor, this isn't a toolsy guy that, man, is going to take a couple of years, all that kind of stuff for him to put it together. His floor is pretty good. All you have to do is watch the tape. It's a guy that won the Heisman Trophy, won the national championship, was the primary reason his team won the national championship, by having ice in his veins, the ability to make big plays, the ability to make big throws. I like the floor as well. I don't feel like he's got a long way to go to be a productive NFL quarterback and a winning NFL quarterback. It's the Morning Tailgate Show. Jesse Merrick is going to be joining us at the top of the hour. Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m.
Vince, Vinny, and Clay want to hear from you. Call or text the show at 702-365-9200. Now, back to the Morning Tailgate.
The Morning Tailgate Show on Raider Nation Radio at 9:20 a.m. It's that time of the week where we bring in our good friend Jesse Merrick, the founder of Silver and Black Sports Network. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, as we always do. We're having another conversation about Fernando Mendoza and the proper time to bring him in. We brought up as an example kind of an eerily similar situation to what the Giants were facing when they had Eli Manning, when they drafted Eli Manning. Kurt Warner was their starter. Tom Coughlin was in the first year of his tenure there with the New York Giants. They were coming off a 4-win season, the year before. They started Kurt Warner. They ended up starting the season 5-4. Yes, they lost 3 straight games to get to that 5-4. They handed it off to Eli Manning, even though their head was above water and the playoffs were very much still a possibility. They handed things off to Eli Manning. He immediately goes 1-6. Looks like a bad decision. But Jesse Merrick, the very next year, probably because of the experiences that Eli Manning went through as a rookie, the Giants are 11-5 in the playoffs. That kind of sounds like maybe a path that the Raiders should be considering and thinking about, regardless of where they are after 8-9 games in the season, maybe even sooner. Hand things off to Fernando Mendoza and get him up to speed in the NFL. But I want your thoughts on what you think should happen with Fernando Mendoza and his starting point as a rookie.
Yeah. Hey, morning, guys. Look, I have always been of the mind of, like, you draft a guy, especially if you draft him number 1 overall, you play the guy. Otherwise, like, if you didn't think he was ready, you wouldn't draft him number 1 overall. Having said that, I understand why the Raiders are taking the approach that they're taking, just because of the offense around them and how that kind of looks, and wanting to really get a read on their offensive line. The thing that stands out to me most is when John Spytek has talked so many times about wanting to set him up for success, and whoever that quarterback was before the draft, when they were doing that, before they admitted they were going to take Fernando and everything. And so I just think they want to get a read on this offensive line. Having said all of that, like I said, I think you throw the kid out there, and I think the NFL wants him to throw him out there too. When you look at the way the season starts, the first month of the season, I mean, you're playing Miami, you go to LA, which is essentially a home game there against the Chargers, and then you go to New Orleans and you're against Kansas City in that first month of the season as Mahomes is trying to get ready, trying to get back with the knee and everything like that. I'd imagine he plays week 1, but, he's still kind of getting settled in. So I think the NFL was hoping that maybe he would get a shot to play, in that first month of the season and probably stir up a little bit of confidence in the team before they go through that brutal stretch there. And to your point, I think there's so many lessons that could be learned, from playing the season, especially at quarterback in the NFL and everything like that. So I don't love that it looks like they're going to take the approach where, they let him sit for a while and then, at some point throw him out there, probably in December, maybe after the bye. But I think, there is still value in that, but you're missing a lot of banked reps that could help possibly accelerate things next season for sure.
What are the most important factors, like the offensive line, in which you feel like, all right, this is a good time for Mendoza to go in there because we're not throwing him into the Wolves. He has protection around him.
Yeah, I think as long as if the offensive line looks like it's holding up, as a coaching staff, I'm ready to throw them out there. Because I think that's the big question mark. Obviously, look, yes, they need to figure out their receiving core and what they've got in that, and you wish that you had a guy that could be that dude as a receiver. Yes, I know they have Brock Bowers and everything like that, but you wish you had that dude. They just don't yet, and they're still in that find out mode as well in the receiving core. But yeah, if the offensive line is healthy, I think you feel good about Fernando Mendoza orchestrating this offense because, for him, it's not necessarily the mind for the game thing by any means. I mean, even you go back and look, in the third down situations, his effectiveness there when he was in college. I think it was the game against Ohio State. He had one of his most efficient performances, and that's as close to his NFL defense as you're going to get with Matt Patricia over there, So he's shown that he can do it from the mental standpoint. It's more so the physical part of the game and the folks around him as well. I'm not questioning whether he can do it physically. I'm just saying, doing it at the NFL level, and putting that arm on display and what he could possibly do in the league with what they've got around him. But again, if the offensive line is in a good spot, I feel pretty good about it because I think that this offense, running game-wise, is going to improve with Clint Kubiak coming to the fold. And so if the offensive line is in a good space, you feel good about Ashton Jeanty being able to take the heat off of Fernando Mendoza as a rookie quarterback and can kind of open the door for him to be able to, attack defenses that are very likely not going to be able to sit in base that are not going to be able to sit in those sub-packages. They're going to have to be in base to defend the run and commit bodies to that and could open the door a bit more for him to be able to attack, lighter coverage looks and things like that.
We're talking to Jesse Merrick from Silver and Black Sports Network here on the Morning Tailgate Show, Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. Jesse, when you look at Fernando Mendoza, here's the other thing that I think about. The floor to me is pretty high right now. This isn't a toolsy guy that you have to refine. Big arm, can run, all these things, but he played in a funky offense in college. There's going to be a real transition of putting those tools together. To me, the floor is there, so I don't have that removes a major worry for me that you're just going to throw a guy that's just not ready to even look like an NFL quarterback. I think he already looks like an NFL quarterback. It's just now getting that floor up to his ceiling.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to look at it because, the thing for me when I talk about floor as it relates to Fernando Mendoza, he's already got that pinpoint accuracy, and I think in the league, everyone talks about those windows being so much smaller and ball placement being so much more important and all those different things, and it's you go back and look at Fernando, that accuracy and his ball placement was off the charts, and that's the thing that everybody's raving about of him coming out. Again, taking the mind portion out of it, out of there, but that does go into the high floor thing as well. So he's shown that he can do it all. I think it's just more so probably a comfortability situation. I honestly, I'd say probably any other team in the league ends up with Fernando Mendoza, he's probably starting week 1. But it just so happens that the Raiders are in town and they signed Kirk Cousins and they're the ones that got him. And so he's going to sit. Because, you go back and look at the history of number 1 quarterbacks, they all play. You'd have to go back pretty far to find the guy that hasn't started in year 1 or hasn't started right away, at least week 1, let alone this season. So I'm so curious to see what that's going to look like. I believe Baker Mayfield was the last quarterback taken number 1 overall that didn't start week 1. So there's a long history of guys doing that. And to your point, it's not this dude that's some freak athlete that's out there running, a crazy 40 time and can throw it a million.
He's not
miles
Anthony
an hour.
Richardson.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fair thing to say because you look at Anthony Richardson and he's got all the physical traits and everything like that, and the rocket arm and everything, and you look at him and you're like, God, okay, this is going to be almost like a Cam Newton 2.0.
Barely played in college, by the way. Barely played in college, too.
Yeah, Fernando's got the banked reps, you know. So, yeah, I agree with where you're coming at it. I just think it's a matter of the Raiders wanting to stick to their guns. And again, I don't think it's necessarily a Fernando thing. I think it's more the team around him type of thing to figure out what they have. And more than anything, I hate to keep powering home, but it's that offensive line. And, yes, they bring in Linderbaum, but there's still question marks at the guard spots and still a question mark at right tackle as well. Things that I think will be answered, that will move in the right direction, but this staff still needs to see it, and it needs to be concrete because they don't want to see their kid get killed, in the first chunk of the season.
I love your shows on the Silver and Black Sports Network up on YouTube. You made some bold predictions recently, but also you also talked about why you think Rob Leonard will bring the heat.
Yeah, I mean, you just go back and look at like his history and the coaches that he's worked under and things like that. And particularly to me, Spagnuolo and Brian Flores really stand out, you know. And I think I was talking to Cody Alexander today, actually. We're going to be dropping an AFC West preview, kind of taking a look at how the Raiders match up with each different team within the division. And, you know, we're looking at the pieces the Raiders brought in, and it's like the aggressiveness and looking at his coaching tree and stuff. Guys like Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean that are honestly they are essentially the same type of player, and you can blitz them and keep opposing offenses guessing and not knowing where that, you know, extra rusher is coming from. And so it's like one of those deals where, like with Brian Flores in particular, it's a coin flip of like, okay, they're going to blitz 50% of the time probably, or well, more than that at times, but like, is it a coin flip on any given play? Is the blitz going to come or is it not, and where is it going to come from? And so that's where I think for the Raiders, for Rob Leonard, and even just where like they're relying on an Eric Stokes, who I think moved in the right direction, but nobody would say is an elite corner, and then are going to be relying on a young corner opposite him as well. Well, you can correct some of that by bringing the heat, making offenses have to kind of speed things up a bit. And so I think that's where we see some of those things come into play in the aggressiveness, because I believe it's Flores, and I think Rob Leonard has even said it, that aggressiveness can correct a lot of mistakes and cover some things up. Obviously, it can expose a lot of things too, but I think we see them lean on that aggressiveness big time. I think the blitz rates are going to be pretty high this year, from a team that we didn't see blitz a ton last year.
So doing that, obviously, you have to have the personnel to be able to pull stuff like that off. So if they are going to be if they're not overly aggressive, but if they are going to be aggressive, and that blitz rate is going to increase, which I agree with you, I think it is. Who are some players to keep an eye on to be utilized as blitzers and kind of profiling as aggressive defensive players that can make things happen and hopefully in the pass rush?
Yeah. The two guys I mentioned in particular really stand out to me with Quay and Nakobe, but particularly Nakobe. I mean, you go and turn on the film, any chance that guy gets matched up with a running back and pass protection, I mean, it just seems like he's blowing that dude up. You know, this is just a guy, a really aggressive dude, heat-seeking missile type of player. To me, I'm so fascinated to see how they use him in particular, but even with Quay, and we've been able to talk and hear from Quay more than we have Nakobe Dean. He's done some other media availabilities with some other folks and stuff, but in terms of Quay Walker, us getting the opportunities to talk with him, he talks about playing more positions than he ever has in his life. And again, I think that's where him moving around, him blitzing from different spots, whether that's in the middle, on the edge, on ball, off ball, all those different things, it's going to be fascinating to see. But even in the secondary too, I mean, I look at guys like Taron Johnson, Traden Stukes, and Jeremy Chin. Like, I think the three of them, it's going to be fascinating to see the blitz looks that we see and how they're used as rushers as well. Particularly with Traden Stukes, just because he's a young dude, and in that defense in Arizona, he moved around all over the place, and so you're going to be able to mix up your looks that way. Taron Johnson, the interesting nickelback that can kind of unlock things for what you're going to do with the defense, and then also again Jeremy Chin being a guy that you probably like playing closer to the line of scrimmage more so than relying on him as a coverage guy. I'd imagine he'll be utilized as a blitzer a decent amount as well. So I'm going to be fascinated to see that. Also too, not necessarily like as a blitzer, but I'm just so curious to see what Kieran Crawford looks like in this defense with Rob Leonard and the different ways that he could potentially use. One of the predictions I made is that he's going to steal a larger share of snaps away from Malcolm Kuntz than I think a lot of people realize. I just really like what this kid brings to the table, and I think he brings a really well-rounded game to the table of just in terms of being able to play with his hand in the dirt, rush from the edge, and also be probably more reliable as a dropper too. I think he's another one of those guys that where like you when he lines up on the edge in particular, you don't necessarily know if he's coming. Again, is that necessarily a blitz? No, but like, hey, is he dropping back? We don't really know. I think he's another guy that can add some intrigue into things for them.
It's Jesse Merrick with the Silver and Black Sports Network. Go on to YouTube, check out his great page there, as well as follow him on X at Jesse SBSN. Jesse, it's awesome having you on. Thank you for this great perspective. Let's do it again next week.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you. You as well. And you know what? We want to spread the good times around here on Raider Nation Radio 920 because we got prize giveaways galore.
Yeah, let's get going here. We got a pair of tickets to give away for the Totally Tubular Festival. It's going to be presented at the Sahara Las Vegas Pool. It's going down on July 25th. Those tickets will be in-house for pickup here, so feel free to swing on by our broadcast station once you win those tickets. Again, it's going to be a pair of tickets to the Totally Tubular Festival presented by the Sahara Las Vegas Pool on July 25th. Let's take caller number 9 right now as we head to break.
We'll take your comments and questions on X. Follow us at RNR 920 AM. Let's dig in to the morning tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920.
Welcome back to the morning tailgate show, Raider Nation Radio 920 AM. Vinny Bonsignor, Clay Baker, Connor doing his thing on the boards. Really appreciate all that. We're talking about Fernando Mendoza. We're talking about the ideal time to bring him in and start building that foundation for him. And regardless of what it might look like early on, it doesn't always look great, doesn't always look bad. Clay, there's a lot of really good examples to draw on in terms of the number one pick overall being a quarterback and just putting him out there and playing at some point and pretty extensively as a rookie. Carson Wentz went 7-9 that first year. The next year they win the Super Bowl. Now he wasn't part of the Super Bowl winning team, but they probably have a better chance or easier path to winning the Super Bowl had he stayed healthy than having him go down with a season-ending knee injury late in the season. But the point is that he went through the growing pains in year one, 7-9. It wasn't all that great, but once again, that experience set him and the Eagles up for a huge turnaround in year two, and that's kind of the vision that I have for the Raiders, and we want your thoughts, 702-365-9200. That's what I have envisioned for the Raiders. And somebody asked this question on Twitter to me. I don't want to play him until he's ready. Well, I'll ask you this, Clay. Ready for what? What are we thinking in terms of he has to be ready, not a day before, not a day after. When he's ready is when he should be out there. How do you even define that? What are you even basing it on? And what is your definition of ready? Is it to go out there and just play, to be able to handle things from an operational standpoint and acquit yourself pretty well? Is it to go out there and win right now? Like what for you defines when he's ready?
There's no perfect situation. Let's just face it. Like you just.
But what would you base it on?
I would base it on, I think I already feel really good on his ability to process what he needs to do. I would only base it on the things around him that he can't control, which is the offensive line.
Yeah, and because the argument was when he's ready.
Right.
So let's even take that out of the equation.
Right.
Like what are you? Because we always bring this up. Tom Telesco, told us he didn't think that Justin Herbert was ready. So that's why Tyrod Taylor started the season in Justin's first season, right? And then there was a mishap on the sidelines moments before a kickoff of a game. All of a sudden, Tyrod's on his way to the hospital. Justin, you're in. And Justin, the record wasn't great that first year. It wasn't a very good football team. That's why they were drafted as high as they did. But Justin Herbert was more than ready to go out there and play in a situation where the team itself didn't think he was ready to go out there and play. So how do you define it? How do you even know until you get him out there and let him play in actual games?
Oh, it's a fantastic question. Let's ask that to Charles in Oregon before we talk to Ryan McFadden at the top of the hour. Charles, is there a perfect situation in which you go and say you push the button on Mendoza to start?
No, I don't think there is a perfect situation. I will say this, though. As we all know, football is the ultimate team sport, right? So in the big picture, you got contracts coming up in the next few years with Brock Bowers. You're going to have one with Jeanty in a few years. You're going to have to pay these guys a lot of money. So the longer you delay Fernando getting out there on the field to get experience, Raider Nation's so hungry for wins. I totally get that. I'd feel the same way sometimes. But in the big picture, when you take a step back, this is about winning on a consistent level. It's been so long since the Raiders have won consistently. Every year, a threat, going to be a playoff team. And you want the, you don't want the, no disrespect intended, but we don't want the 8-9 Jason Campbell Raiders. We don't want the Derek Carr where we're, 500. We want to winning 10, 11 games plus every year. The way you do that is you develop your players, and when you got a young quarterback, you supplement that and build the team up, the defense, everything, so that you're winning consistently. So my thing is, I agree with you guys. I agree with Vinny. Get Fernando out there sooner rather than later. If it's a losing season, it's not a real loss, because he's going to get better, and then next year, hopefully it has that Eli Manning effect, and we're consistently winning on a yearly basis. Thanks for taking my call. God bless.
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm right there with you. Whatever happens, happens. But the bigger picture is you're developing your young quarterback. You're getting him on the field. You're giving him a sense of what NFL quarterback play really is like. Again, I don't feel like he's got. I love the floor of Fernando to be able to go out there and handle it and acquit himself pretty well. I like what the Raiders have put around him. So we'll see. And I do think that everything is being set up for 2027.
This is the Morning Tailgate.
There have been plenty of other coaches, but why not us? Why not this staff? Why not this group of players? I look at it as what a great challenge. We're going to be about the work.
He is back, baby! And the Raiders regain the lead!
With Fitz Sapienza, Vinny Bonsignor, and Clay Baker on Raider Nation Radio 920.
Welcome back to the Morning Tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 AM. Vinny, Clay, and Connor. We're talking about Fernando Mendoza. Timelines. What's your preferred timeline? Are you willing to maybe sacrifice outcomes for development, setting the Raiders up for future success as early as 2027 by just getting the rookie quarterback out on the field, letting him learn what it's like to play quarterback in the NFL, and just expediting that process. Out to the guest line to welcome in our really good friend Ryan McFadden, who covers the Raiders and does a really good job of it with ESPN. Ryan, I really appreciate you joining us as you do each week. I'm going to ask you the question that we've been asking everybody today. What's your ideal scenario? What would your ideal scenario be for getting Fernando Mendoza on the field as a rookie, or do you feel like it's even important for him to get on the field extensively as a rookie top pick in the draft?
I think for me, the perfect scenario is you let Kirk Cousins do his thing to start the season as the starting quarterback for let's say the first 5 the season, see where the Raiders are at record in the standings and record-wise. And then, if Kirk Cousins is the Raiders are doing well and Kirk Cousins playing at a high level, you keep rolling with him. If not, you turn to Mendoza and see what you have at the future of the quarterback position. So I think overall, I don't think the Raiders should rush this process, because I think you do more damage trying to rush him out there and he's not ready than trying to throw him in the fire early on. And like I said, we will see him this year. I personally think he'll probably be, after we're 6 games in. But I don't think this is a situation where the Raiders need to rush him on the field week 1.
Real quick, Clay, I apologize. Are you fearful that he's the type of quarterback that this would be a rush job. I look at his floor coming off what he did at Indiana. I feel pretty good about the floor. But do you see it as he's got a long way to go, and I'm not going to put him out on the field early on because he's just too far off from being a guy that could go out there and acquit himself as an NFL quarterback?
I don't think it's that. I still think just based on what we saw from OTAs and mandatory minicamp, I still think I don't think he's a ways to go, but I still think he still needs more time to learn and grow and get familiar with the system and everything. I don't see it as a situation where you're dealing with a guy who you might look at who just has raw talent as more of a project, and you really have to sit him for a whole year. I don't think it's that. I just think it's a matter of you just want to take your time with it, and the guys who are running the show, Tom Minority under Tom Brady, Joe Mayer, John Spicek, and head coach Tim Kubiak, they're big guys in terms of letting the quarterback develop until they believe he's 100% ready to go. So when he is out there, that he's looking as comfortable as possible. But when you look at Fernando Mendoza, I don't think it's a situation where you're like, oh my gosh, he's a year away. I don't think that's the case.
Ryan, it's also a part to have a good cohesive offensive line, but having weapons, skill position players that can go and at least help bear the burden of what a rookie quarterback could do in his first season. And you noted that how Brock Bowers has the potential for a breakout and a career season coming up. How do you think that goes into the mix of not only having an offensive line that has weapons, that has cohesion, but weapons like Bowers that is available?
Yeah, that's huge because no matter if it's Fernando Mendoza or Kirk Cousins starting at quarterback, I think Brock Bowers is like a security blanket in the passing game. We saw that during practice. Even even when the times when he was healthy during the season. But yeah, even in practice with Kirk Cousins, that was his go-to guy. He's constantly feeding Brock Bowers. This is a guy who, like I said, I wrote that he has a chance for a career season just given the fact that he's in a much more improved offensive system. Yes, he's fully healthy. He doesn't have the knee injury that was lingering throughout the year. I think he got hurt week 1, and he has the potential to break out. This is a guy that Clint Kubiak is known for. In his system, he doesn't target in the past, doesn't target tight ends quite a bit. But when you look at Brock Bowers, they don't view him as a tight end. He's just he's like the ultimate weapon. The word Sean Payton he's in Denver, the word joker. That's the type of guy Brock Bowers is. Someone go line up in line, in a slot, out wide. You can do so many things with Brock Bowers. And just given the lack of the unproven depth at wide receiver and no true wide receiver number 1 in that position group, that just leads to Brock Bowers, if fully healthy, to be the guy that's going to get a ton of targets. And he's someone that when the ball is thrown his way and the ball is in his hands, he knows how to make plays. So I think that's why I think Brock Bowers is going to be huge for whoever starts at quarterback. I think he's in line for a big season if he can stay healthy in Clint Kubiak's system.
We're talking to Ryan McFadden from ESPN, does a fantastic job covering the Raiders. Okay, that said, and you alluded to the fact that maybe the Raiders don't have that, premier number 1 type wide receiver, but they are going to need contributions from those wide receivers. What do you think a realistic and ideal production number would be for Jalen Nailor and Trey Tucker this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I remember last year Trey Tucker. When you go back to the start of the year with Trey, he was a guy that could have was on track to get 1,000 receiving yards. And as the offense continued to spiral, his numbers went down as well. But Trey Tucker, he was still a guy who was able to get open, beat defenders in one-on-one opportunities. So I think Trey Tucker, I think he has the potential to, I still think he has the potential to get maybe just shy of 1,000 yards, maybe hit that 1,000-yard mark. I think you're going to see Jalen Nailor's numbers uptick because they're going to need him. He's going to, he's not playing behind Justin Jefferson like he did in Minnesota. So I think that's a guy who can probably, get around. I don't know, probably around 700, 750 receiving yard, maybe 800. So I think those guys have a potential to, see their numbers to make some solid contributions in that wide receiver room.
could you ever foresee, for targets for wide receivers to be kind of handcuffed by just the philosophy and nature of how Kubiak wants to do a 50-50 run-pass split? Obviously you're going to have Bowers in the mix, but could you see how targets for wide receivers could also be kind of limited because of how they want to do and philosophize this offense?
Yeah, I think so, but I think those guys are still going to get. I still think they're going to get enough targets to be able to make plays, and be able to contribute in this offense. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, that 50-50 offense, I think that's going to be beneficial, especially if this offensive line can can play better than they were last year, because that's going to even. Having that 50-50 offense, that also unlocks Ashton Jeanty. And, it gives them a chance. It gives them a chance to try to, get an advantage on the defense, being able to have Ashton Jeanty more involved. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to see how this plays out. But at the end of the day, I think, those focal points on this offense will be Ashton Jeanty, the running back, and Brock Bowers.
Ryan, we talk all about the offense quite a bit, and rightfully so. With Fernando Mendoza, new head coach, is an offensive-minded coach, and Clint Kubiak. But there were big changes made on the defensive side of the football, including Rob Leonard being promoted from defensive line coach to defensive coordinator. Do you feel like there's going to be dramatic differences in how this defense looks, or subtle differences? And how much improvement, based on personnel and maybe the new voice in charge, how much improvement do you feel like is possible for this defense?
I think they have a chance to improve. I think with Rob Leonard, I think they're going to be a lot more aggressive up front. So I can see an opportunity where the Raiders are going to see their improving sack numbers and in terms of and pressure rate. I think those numbers has a chance to uptick as well. I think that's going to be one of the biggest things. I think you're going to see a lot of moving pieces out there with a lot of versatility, whether it's in the secondary with Teron Johnson, someone who can play in the slot, or he can even, if needed, get back there in safety, same with Traden Stukes, the rookie. That's another guy who can play multiple positions in the secondary, as well as Jeremy Chin. You look at someone like Quay Walker, even though he's an off-ball linebacker, he's a guy who can, they can put on the edge and pressure the quarterback and stop the run. So I think you're going to see a lot more moving pieces on this defense compared to last year. I think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, just given the fact that that's what Rob Leonard wants. He wants an aggressive defense that's going to get after the quarterback. So I can see a situation where they do see an increase in sack numbers and pressure rate if everything goes well.
You were at Faith Lutheran over the weekend for the annual SAC Summit hosted by Max and Cam Jordan and Von Miller. How did Max look, and what are your expectations for a timeline and what he's able to do for camp?
Max looks good. He's still, he didn't do too much during the SAC Summit. You can tell, same way how it was during, the Raiders practice. He's taking it very slow to make sure, things are going well. But he did say he feels good. And I think, when we get to training camp, I think they're going to still ease him in, just given the fact that he did not practice he didn't practice at all during OTAs and mandatory minicamp. So you can see him ease in. They're going to ease him in. But yeah, I think Max Crosby has a chance to be ready to go by the start of the season.
Who else needs to emerge in and around Max Crosby for this pass rush to take what needs to be a big step forward?
I think one thing to keep in mind is Malcolm Kuntz. Malcolm Kuntz, I believe this is a guy who he showed a little bit last year he was coming back from the knee injury, and there were times where he showcased a guy who I believe had 8.5 sacks 2 seasons ago, but you kind of want to see him trying to get back to that guy we saw back in 2023, because that would be huge for the Raiders in terms of taking the pressure a bit off of Max Crosby, even helping their pass rush efforts a lot.
Having that kind of defensive pressure really bodes well for a young secondary that wants to be a ball hawk, attack mode, and explosive entity. How can somebody like Jermod McCoy kind of take hold of perhaps what that position group could look like in camp?
Yeah, if Jamal McCoy comes into training camp and he's practicing a lot more, there's a little bit less restriction on him compared to it was during the spring practices. He has a chance to emerge as a potential starter. Like I've said before, this is a guy who went into the NFL draft as a projected top 15 pick. Mm-hmm. There's some experts out there that thought McCoy was the best quarterback in the draft, and yet due to concerns long-term concerns with the knee, not on the short term, but the long term and the longevity of his knee, that led to him to drop all the way to day 3 in the draft. But he's in a situation where I think outside of Eric Stokes and Teron Johnson, that's a pretty wide open competition out there for the other starting quarterback job. And with that said, McCoy is someone who's very good at man coverage, is very aggressive, has shown during his time in college to make plays on the ball. But the Raiders really, they didn't do too well last year. He has a chance to emerge, but compete with Darian Porter for the starting job. If he's able to go into training camp, play with a little bit put less restrictions, and he's playing with less restrictions compared to the spring. Yeah, he has a chance to emerge as a potential starter. But either way, I think you're going to see him. You see him play quite a bit in the fall.
As our resident, wrapping up here with Ryan McFadden from ESPN, as our resident Washington Wizards fan, first impressions of your guy AJ Dibonsu.
Man, AJ looks like a star in the making. I'm looking forward to it. This is like I told you guys, this is the happiest I've ever been as a Wizards fan in a long time. Probably you're going back to 2017 when they won 49 games. But yeah, he looks like, 2 games in, I was there for the first one where he dropped 27 and then he scored 23 on the Kings. And man, he looks like he's doing it on both ends of the floor. He's able to get to the basket, get to the knows how to get to the free throw line. He just looks like a guy who has the potential to be a future star. And just seeing how he is going to be, I'm excited to see how he plays with Trae Young, Anthony Davis, if he remains a Wizard, Alex Sarr. There's a lot of young pieces there, along with the two veteran all NBA guys that they brought in as well. So I'm excited. The future's bright. And just seeing AJ Dibonsu out there playing, it just gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Well, we are happy for you, my good friend. And you know what? By the way, we're almost there. We're almost at training camp, so look forward to seeing you out in Henderson. It's been a long off season, but we're almost there. Ryan McFadden, thank you so much. We'll do it again next week. Appreciate it, brother.
Sounds good, guys. As always, thanks for having me.
You too. You got it. And real quick, we're going to go out to Raider Mike, who wants to chime in about how he thinks or what his thought is in terms of a great timeline or an ideal timeline to get Fernando Mendoza on the field. Raider Mike, how you doing, brother?
Miss you guys. What's up, Clay?
What's up, Mike?
Where's the other Vinny? How you been, bro?
Hey, man, doing good, thanks.
Anyway.
What do you think about all this?
Here's my view on this. Look, Kirk Cousins has the answers to the test already in his head. So I really can't see him beating, Fernando beating him in camp. He's too far ahead of the curve. And he's a good quarterback when he's healthy, and I think he's healthy. But as soon as he starts losing, that's it. Mm-hmm. The Lamborghini's coming out of the garage immediately. So there'll be a short chain on Cousins because I'm with you guys on the fact he's not going to get good until he plays in real life, real games. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's always been with quarterbacks. I mean, Manning was 1-15 or 1-13 his first season. So I mean,
his brother was 1-6.
Yeah, it is what it was, and so I the man in charge right now, Mr. Kubiak, and with Brady above him looking down, they'll know if Fernando's ready because they want to pull the Lamborghini out too. They really do. But if he's not, you guys are going to have eyes on this camp coming up.
Yeah.
And you're going to be reporting it every day.
I just can't imagine that. I mean, the word ready is it's kind of a loaded word for me. Ready for what? Ready not to embarrass himself? Ready to win? Like, I don't feel like we're going to see a quarterback in training camp that you're like, oh my gosh, he is so far off. I think he's going to look good in training camp. You know what I'm saying? So when everyone says he has to be ready, I'm just wondering, but ready for what? Because being an NFL quarterback, I don't know that anyone's truly ready day one to do that. You have to actually go out there and experience it and build up to the point where now you know what it's going to take to be an NFL quarterback. It's hard to replicate that other than actually going out there and playing.
Well, he's shown he can get cracked in the face against Ohio State. True. That hit, there's no way me or you would have got up from that. Maybe ever. I mean, that's how hard he was hit. And he just got up and won the game. So the dude is a badass. I love Fernando. So I haven't said that in a long time on air. But, no, I'm pumped. I mean, we've done all the right moves. I'm just waiting in anticipation out in Appalachia. And I can't even hear you guys, but I'm getting transferred to Charlotte in a week or so. So I'll be able to call more and listen more. Great show. What do you think of the World Cup, guys?
I would say that I'm gonna go out on a limb and say England's gonna win it all.
I like the two underdogs. I like Spain and Argentina. Why not?
There you go.
Okay.
Raider Mike, thank you, man. Really appreciate it. Why don't you send us out? Oh, he wasn't. Was he not ready for the moment?
I don't think he was. He's in Appalachia, and he's thinking his eyes are on Charlotte. He can't wait for the discharge to the move.
Yeah, the whole thing about you don't put him out there until he's ready. I kind of struggle with that one because there's going to be a learning curve. Nobody gets it day one. And I don't think he's gonna. I don't like short of in training camp, and this wouldn't be I wouldn't be overly worried. But if we watch him in training camp and it just doesn't look very good, then obviously then you're not even ready just to go step on the field. But Clay, I remember seeing Aiden O'Connell as a rookie going, you know what, he could go out there and acquit himself pretty well. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he did. He had to go out there and play. That first year and didn't play very badly at all. And I don't think he has nearly the floor or the ceiling of Fernando Mendoza. So, it'll be interesting. And obviously it's up to Clint Kubiak and John Swiatek and everybody in that building to make that determination of when the right time is to put Fernando Mendoza out on the field. Is that day one? Is that week 6? Or is it 2027? It's the Morning Tailgate Show, Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. coming up at the bottom of the hour. We've got the great Jason Fitz. And we want your call, 702-365-9200.
Vince, Vinny, and Clay want to hear from you. Call or text the show at 702-365-9200. Now, back to the Morning Tailgate.
Welcome back to the Morning Tailgate on Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. Vinny, Clay, and Connor. And, of course, as we do every week this time of the week, we welcome in our good friend, great Raider fan, Grammy Award winner, Jason Fitz. Jason, once again, first of all, thank you for joining us on the Morning Tailgate Show. Once again, we're talking about the ideal time to inject Fernando Mendoza onto the field. And Jason, we brought up an example back in 2004 when the Giants, coming off I think it was a 4-win season, Tom Coughlin was in his first year on the job. They draft Eli Manning, or they obviously trade for Eli Manning. He was the first pick in that draft. They also had Kurt Warner. They started the season with Kurt Warner. They're 5-4. They lose 3 games in a row to get to 5-4, but their heads above water. They're playing better football than they did the year before. They're still in line for a potential playoff run, and Tom Coughlin says, nope, it's time to go to Eli Manning. He goes 1-6, and there was a lot of controversy, I remember, with that decision. But the next year, the Giants went 11-5 with Eli Manning, starting from pole to pole, and I'm just wondering if maybe that's kind of a plan that the Raiders should adopt, short of starting him for Fernando Mendoza week 1, but maybe giving it a little bit of time and then handing it over to Fernando, whatever the outcomes might be, but really getting his feet under him, his legs under him, all of those good things to really set themselves and Fernando up for success 2027. What are your thoughts?
It allows you to start the season. If it's clear that he needs more work before he's ready to play, it allows you to start the season with the mindset to everybody that, oh my God, we're going to try and win, and we're going to put Fernando in when it makes the most sense. And then if things aren't going well enough early in the season, it's an easy out. So I see the logic to that a little bit in the sense of waiting and seeing for him. It's interesting to me too, because I'm not sure what we expect from Fernando. I think we got to sort of calm our expectations a little bit. Number 1 overall pick, it's going to take a little bit of time. I think it always takes a little bit of time, but I keep thinking about the Jeremy Fowler quarterback rankings that just came out, and it's funny because you've got guys like Dak and Justin Herbert that are widely considered by the entire league to be top 8 quarterbacks by NFL GMs and scouts and front office personnel, but then you got guys like Sam Darnold that just won a Super Bowl and Jalen Hurts that's won a Super Bowl MVP staggered in the mid-teens, and I think there's a valuable lesson we learn from that, and that is that the team around you matters, and making sure you're getting the right things around people, systems matter, all that stuff. How many teams gave up on Sam Darnold before he got to the point that now he's a Super Bowl champion that's won a lot of games the last 2 years? So I think we have to understand short-term, long-term, and as we talk about all the time, what's the best situation long-term? That's what they got to answer. I do think the more I think about it, that it'd be a bummer if Fernando doesn't get some good playing time this year, because I want to see him knock the rust off and get the experience in and get the demons out of the beginning of your NFL career. I think there's an advantage to not waiting and burning a whole year before you do that in year 2. But I think it gets tricky, because if you're playing Kubiak, you don't want to come in from the outset. If in practice it's clear that he's not quite ready, you don't want to lose the locker room from the outset by essentially telling the entire locker room, hey, we're going to play him for experience, so this season doesn't really mean anything for you guys. You have to walk that fine line.
And also, there's a part of this where there may not be ever a perfect situation when you think about what this year could be for somebody like Fernando Mendoza. I mean, as you talked about the top 10 quarterbacks on that list, Justin Herbert was part of that. It wasn't a perfect situation when Tyrod Taylor got hurt in week 2, and next thing you know, Herbert has to start. And there was valuable time and valuable games that he learned. Hell, even Baker Mayfield when he was drafted, his team coming off a winless season, Tyrod Taylor gets hurt in week 3, and he is jettisoned in there, and it wasn't like they made the playoffs in Cleveland, but they did go 7-8-1.
Yeah, and to that point, you're never ready. You're never really ready to start one of these guys. You just got to figure out sort of what makes the most sense and then make the most of it. I also think that there's an element of, if we want the best out of this team this year, and the best out of this team includes Fernando, it's going to take everybody around Fernando being really good. Look back at Bryce Young, and Bryce was in and out of the lineup. And the funny thing to me about that is, and I remember telling you guys at the time, but the knock I heard on Bryce coming out of college is that he wasn't great at picking up some of the offensive line communication and some of the blitz pickups. So, frankly, for Bryce early in his first year, he looked terrible. They went out and spent some money on an experienced offensive line. Suddenly, he looked better. They addressed a weakness that helped him, but he was still in and out of the lineup. What we don't want to see, for everybody that wants to see Fernando start, what I don't want to see is Fernando starts a few games, it's clear he's not ready, he gets benched, and then everybody's asking questions about Fernando, and then Kirk Cousins comes back in, and now we've got this revolving door. So I think you also have to just be aware of the fact that, you're right, there's no perfect situation, but you need the right pieces around to be playing at the highest level. I think the Raiders have some of those pieces here, but I do think that we have to have a little bit of caution to what we're asking for. Like, be careful what you wish for. I want Fernando to play when he's ready, not when we want to see Fernando.
Yeah, and we're talking to Jason Fitz, our good friend Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. How much comfort do you have when we're talking about this is the fact that Fernando Mendoza started 36 games in college. This isn't a raw, toolsy, it's not an Anthony Richardson situation where, you could run like the wind, you can throw the ball a mile, but you didn't really have a whole lot of time in college, practical playing time in college. So it makes sense that you're just going to have to sit a year as you get accustomed just to playing quarterback and, at this level. To me, Fernando Mendoza's floor is way higher than that. It's pretty high, actually, I think, based on what we saw in college. So does that give you less apprehension of putting him out there as early as possible, because it isn't somebody that's trying to make the transition from being this toolsy guy into a quarterback? He's shown that he can play quarterback at a pretty high level already.
Yeah, and you're 1,000% right. And by the way, he's also coming from a coach in Curt Cignetti that, I think certainly Clint Kubiak, I'm going to trust, has been watching as much Curt Cignetti and trying to figure out as much of that to bring to this offense. How do you make everybody comfortable? I think that we should be realistically now seeing less busts than ever at the quarterback position in the NFL draft, because you've got guys that are playing more and more college football. Like, I think for the most part, the days of this guy's only got 14 starts, but we're going to make him the first overall pick, I think they're more dead than not, and that's a beautiful thing, because of NIL and the way guys transfer now and the way they keep playing and how much money they're making. It's a beautiful thing. But again, it's a reminder that a year ago it was, look at this quarterback class, and it turned out to be wildly different. Well, that's actually a benefit to the NFL, because what you don't want are a bunch of guys that have barely played any football stepping onto the field and say, we had 13 games to evaluate and we misevaluated him based on that. Okay, well, you're right. Fernando has a massive amount of tape that everyone can look at. The Raiders should be more prepared than most teams ever are going into their first overall picks, because of the amount of time on task they have to watch, and their ability to see him in multiple systems, their ability to see him with multiple players around him. Like, he's answered more questions than most first overall picks because of the nature of what college football's become.
We see some pushback and hear it on the phones and on the text line about Kirk Cousins. They not only, don't rush Mendoza out there if he's not ready, but number two, there's an opportunity cost, because people feel like, Kirk Cousins gives the Raiders the best chance to win right now. Where do you stand on that? Because as we've seen Kirk Cousins over the past few seasons, winning in Cousins is not necessarily a given.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, is that Cousins coming off of the Achilles was just not the same, right? So who is he now? And I think it takes a lot longer. Like, we spent some time this morning on Yahoo talking about Daniel Jones and the Colts, and everybody's like, he's been cleared to play week one. Mm-hmm. Being cleared to play from an Achilles injury and actually being ready to be who you were pre-Achilles injury are two very different things, especially when you're not a spring chicken anymore. So I think, we've got to look at Kirk and say part of this is injury, part of this is system. But even when we watch the quarterback documentary that all of us watch, the amount of times you saw Kirk on the phone with his coach and say, man, I'm just not seeing it well. I'm not playing well enough. Like, I think Kirk would have to acknowledge, because he's acknowledged it on camera before, that, he hasn't necessarily played as clean as the best of Kirk Cousins can be over the course of the last couple of post-injury. So, yes, certainly, I think there are two obligations that this coaching staff has. Number one, and the most important one, is whatever's best for Fernando. Because, again, I can't say this loud enough. If the coaches look around and say, hey, you know what? The best thing for Fernando is to not play a snap this year, then he shouldn't play. And if they look around and say the best thing for Fernando is to play every single snap, then he should play. And if that means the Raiders don't win a single game, who cares? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, Fernando Mendoza will be the future of this franchise. If the franchise is going to be worth anything on the field for the next 5 years, or they're going to bust out and be absolutely a joke for the next 5 years, it will largely rely on whether or not they're able to get the most out of the number one overall pick. That's just what happens. Like, that's the ultimate consequence of going wrong at number one. It sets your entire franchise back. So with that being said, I just don't think that there's a huge obligation for this coaching staff to prioritize winning. I think that's the number two priority behind the development of Fernando Mendoza. And, again, if you have to watch an 0-17 season, but it means for the next 15 years you got your quarterback, who cares? If you get to watch a 9-8 season this year where you make the playoffs, you feel good about it, but it hindered in any way, shape, or form, even slightly, the development of Fernando, and you get less than for the next 15 years, it wasn't worth it. So, yeah, I can't stress this enough. I think that the number one priority for this fan base, we want to watch wins. For this team, the only thing that matters, and week in and week out, is Fernando Mendoza getting better for the next decade.
Talking to Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports. Jason Fitz, I want to take you back to 2016, a running back by the name of Todd Gurley. He had 278 carries for the Rams that year, a very bad Rams team, by the way, 885 yards, 3.2 yards per carry. The very next year, one more carry than the year before, 279 to 278. Yet he ran for 1,300 yards, scored 13 touchdowns. The yards per average went up to 4.7 from 3.2. He didn't get the ball any more than he got the year before, yet the production was through the roof, different from one year to the next. He also caught, I think, 43 passes, or no, 64 passes for 788 yards the year before. He had 43 for 327. I ask you that to ask you about Ashton Jeanty. I don't necessarily think he has to carry the ball anymore. I do think he will, but I don't think he has to carry much more than he did last year. 266, I believe, was the number. But realistically, getting that yards per carry average with a new system, a new quarterback, a new offensive line, or what looks to be a better offensive line, and a better play caller, better play schemer, can we expect something similar in Ashton Jeanty, much like we saw from Todd Gurley 2016 and 2017? The carries didn't expand. It's just that things around him were more efficient.
If we don't see a drastic improvement in Ashton Jeanty, then it means that the money spent on Taylor Linderbaum was largely wasted. The reason you make him so wildly highly paid going into the offseason, twofold. Number one, you need an experienced center with the quarterback. That is a massive part of it. But number two, you're bringing in an experienced center that can help the entire communication of the entire offensive line so that you can get more out of your draft pick from last year in Ashton Jeanty. To me, that's so clear. Ashton Jeanty is a special running back that I think last year was sabotaged by an awful offensive line around him. Also was sabotaged by, frankly, like when we're spending the summer talking about changing the stance of the Heisman winning running back and whether or not it's right for him to be in a different position pre-run, like what are you doing? Why'd you draft him if the first thing you're going to do is change the way he stands before he even takes the ball? And none of it made sense. The goal of rookie running backs is to make them comfortable quickly, not to start changing the very fundamentals of what they do in a position that's expected to be on the field from day one. I think there was some malpractice, frankly, from the way it was all handled by Chip Kelly from the outset. So I believe that there's going to be a massive leap in Ashton Jeanty and his ability, simply because that's why you pay Tyler Linderbaum gross, unheard of, market-changing for the entire offensive line money. Like, let's remember, other teams stood there and thought it was a misprint when they saw that the Raiders aggressively went that in on the center position at a historic level of money for an interior offensive lineman. And I will never fault the Raiders for doing it as long as it gets the outcome that they need, which is more ease for Fernando Mendoza and more production for Ashton Jeanty. That's why you're paying Tyler what he's getting paid. He's worth every penny, by the way, and more. So I think that deal was a great one for the Raiders, but we'll see week 1, week 2, week 3. Can you run the football, especially when if you've got a young quarterback playing and everybody's keying in on the run? Can you still create gaps for Ashton to run through? I think the answer is going to be yes. I think the running back position is going to be much more productive. I stand by what I said last year. I think Ashton Jeanty is a star. I think this year he'll show it.
In wrapping up, Jason, we want to make sure that you get this message out as you're having a double bypass surgery in less than a week from now. And I know you're busy, but yet you've always had a very strict diet, a very good regimen for exercise, but that wasn't enough. Can you explain to the audience, because maybe there's people out there right now that might be feeling the same way, of how you were taking a look at your heart test results and you were still pursuing more answers because you had big questions?
Yeah, and thanks for letting me talk about this for a second. I will say 2 years ago when I hired a trainer out of Nashville and did everything remote, the first thing he did was say, we need to get some blood work on you just to see what your baselines are across the board. And 2 years ago, there were two numbers that stood out. One's called your lipoprotein A number, and the other was your cardiocalcium score. And those are two numbers that were triple what they're supposed to be. And everything else on my blood work was perfect. And everybody kept looking at it and saying, well, it's going to be a bad test. So we retested. And every few months we kept retesting. And I started seeing cardiologists, kept going to different cardiologists because they kept saying the same thing. You're working out in the gym 2 hours. You're running sprints. You don't have chest pains. You don't have shortness of breath. It's got to be just a weird test result. You're fine. And I kept saying, I'm not going to take maybe as an answer on my heart. I'm not afraid to die. I don't want to die on a treadmill at a Planet Fitness. That's my baseline. So I kept asking questions, and I finally found a cardiologist, the fourth one I went to, that said, how can we make you more comfortable so you stop worrying about it? And I asked for a contrast test. And I'll never forget, they called me a week later, I guess, and I was standing on the field in an indoor football league game. I just run sprints with a bunch of IFL players for exercise. And the cardiologist called me and said, whatever you're doing, don't let your heart rate raise. You've got to start watching this. You have 3 massive blockages. I've got a blockage at the Widowmaker and 2 blockages in my LED, which is your main artery in your heart. So, yeah, on Monday, they're going to go. It's genetic. The lipoprotein gives them the concept that it's genetic. We tried to put a stent in, and we got all the way to the end of the stent, and the doctor said, this is just too bad and too much to stent. So, yeah, I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I'm completely asymptomatic. If I didn't know, I would have gone to run sprints today. But on Monday, they're going to saw me open. I'll be in the hospital for 4 or 5 days, and I start a 12-week recovery process. It's going to be long and grueling. But I say all of this, guys, to say so many of us don't like blood work. We don't like going to the doctor. We don't like information. But we owe it to ourselves and to the people that we love to do exactly that. So go get the information, go get answers. If there's something that doesn't make sense, don't take maybe for an answer. Fight for yourself, and eventually, look, I'm not looking forward to getting sawed open, but you know what? I don't look at it as a curse that I have this. I look at it as a blessing that I found out before it got to a point that I wasn't here anymore. So Raider Nation has been beautiful on social media, responding to the video I put up about it, but which I thank you guys. It's part of why I love being part of this family. But I implore everybody, especially guys, dudes don't like going to the doctor. Go to the doctor, ask for comprehensive blood work. Take a look, again, lipoprotein. If you remember nothing else, remember protein and calcium. 2 words we all know. Look at your protein and your cardio calcium scores. It'll give you indicators. But, man, just get information, because the last thing you want is the worst thing in the world to happen. I'm incredibly lucky that's not what my fortune was.
From all of us here at the station, this is a heartfelt good luck, and we wish you the very best. All our thoughts and prayers are to you, and as well as through Raider Nation, all of us are always wishing you the best, and especially now, and we look forward to talking to you after a very full and speedy recovery, my good buddy.
I'm not going anywhere, boys. We've waited too long for a quarterback. I intend to watch Fernando dominate this league. Let's go.
That's inspiration enough. Jason, thank you again for your time, and we're going to wish you the very best this coming Monday.
Thank you, boys. Love you, boys. Have a great time.
Love you very much.
You too.
That's Jason Fitz with Yahoo Sports. Follow him on X at Jason Fitz. Make sure you let him know how important it is for him to go through a recovery, and thank him for that perspective, especially about getting your test results and watching out for the proteins and the cardio calcium. We'll get to our final sit down at 702-365-9200 is a number you may want to know, because there's very exciting prizes and gifts on the way for you.
Yeah, I got a 4-pack of tickets to give away here if you want to take the family out, if you want to take some friends, maybe they're in town. Well, a 4-pack of tickets to see the Las Vegas Aviators taking on the El Paso Chihuahuas. This is going to be going down on July 25th. That's going to be not this Saturday, but next Saturday. You can get a 4-pack of tickets to see the Aviators versus the El Paso Chihuahuas. Just be caller number 9 right now at 702-365-9200. That's going to be caller number 9 at 702-365-9200 for your chance at a 4-pack to go see the Las Vegas Aviators versus the El Paso Chihuahuas.
This is the Morning Tailgate.
Oh, Paisan. Oh! Back up. I'll talk to him about it. I've been telling you for months now this guy's no good. I want to sit down. All right. Answer the phone. I want to sit down.
Hey! On Raider Nation Radio 920.
Oh!
I think it comes with the territory. Year 15 in the league. I'm no stranger to how this thing works. So you go out there, you play the best you can, you help your team best you can, contribute to our team's success, and you let the decisions get made as they get made. But I expect to, be able to help this team win and to be out there on the field, and you roll with whatever happens. You stay focused and on what's going on inside the building. I don't think it's ever helped me to kind of look at what's happening outside the building, and just go enjoy the process with your teammates and your coaches, and we'll see where it all settles out.
That's Raider quarterback Kirk Cousins. It's the morning tailgate show, Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m., and it's the final sit down. And Clay, I think Kirk Cousins, without a doubt, has a clear understanding of what the role could be, what it could not be. Maybe I think he's obviously been advised and made aware of all the different ways, all the various ways this thing might play out, and he sounds like he's completely fine with whatever happens, and let it roll once training camp starts to see where it all goes.
Oh yeah, he's been around the league and he understands what is at stake, and that they know how important Fernando Mendoza is to this organization going forward. But also, Cousins' ability to get this offense is also a part of this, and we saw this from the text line from Eric in the 715 talking about, he says, you're missing the point of having Cousins. There's no way Fernando is learning this offense in just a few preseason snaps. This offense is new to everyone, and Cousins is here to teach on the field. How important do you feel like getting that install, what Kubiak wants, done, and how important Cousins really is for that hallmark to bridge that gap so everyone is on the same page when it comes to this style of West Coast offense?
Well, a couple of things I think it's important to remember. Fernando Mendoza has been at this for a long time now. It's not just a matter of a couple of preseason games and a couple of practices. They've been literally at this since let's just say May, all right, when they got in after getting drafted, rookie mini camp, all the OTAs. I mean, there's extensive work that's already been put in terms of learning the offense and digesting the offense. And I would venture to say that he's probably been, I'm sure he took a little bit of a break, but I'm sure he's been working day after day after day, studying the playbook, getting into the building, doing what he's able to do, whatever you're allowed to do this time of year in the building. I don't think there's been a second that's been wasted in terms of all that. I go back to the conversation that we had with him at his pro day and about how everything that he was doing every single day is to be the best possible quarterback that he could be in September, not October, not December, but September when the season opens. That's what his race is that he's dealing with, his individual race, and it started a long time ago, Clay. It's not just a matter of now training camp and installing the offense. There's a lot of work that's already been done, right?
Yeah, we see the hard work that he's been doing ever since he was getting into the motion of being drafted, of taking work with Brian Greasy to learn West Coast concepts, taking snaps under center. So you can see not only the hard work is there, but we've heard from just about everybody his ability to process information is off the charts.
Yep, absolutely. I want to say thanks to Ryan McFadden, Jesse Merrick, Jason Fitz. I want to say thanks to Connor. I want to say thanks to Clay. I want to say thanks to all our callers and our listeners and our texters. Appreciate it. We're back at it tomorrow on the Morning Tailgate Show on Raider Nation Radio, AM 920 AM. Tomorrow morning. See you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Make sure to stay with it. Q Myers is coming up, JT the Brick at 12, and then Q Myers Unnecessary Roughness 2 to 5 p.m.